Hi, I'm Eric. This is the Long Box Review comic book podcast, and welcome to the spotlight on the 1981 novel by Elliot S. Maggin, Superman Miracle Monday. To help me with this endeavor is the perfect guest because she has a podcast where she talks about the books that she reads. That podcast is Nerd Goggles, and the host of that podcast is returning guest MJ. Good Miracle Monday to you, MJ.
Good Miracle Monday to you.
So glad to have you back to talk. It's been a while. Let's see, the last time you and I chatted on an episode of the Long Box Review podcast was that 15th anniversary live show that I did.
Yep.
Last year? Yeah, it was.
I think so.
Yeah, it was just 2026. Yeah, it was last year. Ever since I retired, time is extremely fluid. I don't know when things happen, and there's the whole COVID thing where I think, for some reason, I think COVID started in 2018. I don't know why, but for some reason, 2018 hits, and then suddenly in my mind, I zoom to 2020. And when COVID,
well, maybe something that the rest of us don't know.
No. It's just my brain is not functioning well ever since I don't punch a clock from 9 to 5 anymore. Anyway, before that, MJ and I got together in 2019 where we discussed not only your podcast, we talked about the Birds of Prey of Like Minds collection, which were issues 56 through 61, and that's one of my very favorite conversations because it was new material to me, and I had never talked to you before. And so it was just really great fun. Getting to know you. So with that, tell the people, because like I said, it's been a while since you've been on the show. What is Nerd Goggles? What's it about? Why do you do it? All that fun stuff.
So Nerd Goggles is a podcast. Initially, how it started was that I would always tell my sister and one of my friends when we'd be driving, just for something to talk about, I would tell them about a book I was reading, and this is, and they weren't going to read the book, so they didn't care if I spoiled it. So that's the whole kind of premise of my podcast. It's very spoilery, and so I would just sit there as we're driving or whatever, and I would tell them, recap the whole book for them that I knew they weren't going to read, and then I started listening to other podcasts that people were doing, like on comics and all that kind of stuff, and it sounded like a good idea, but I felt like there was a lot of people doing comics already that I knew. And I was like, well, I don't want to jump on that. Because like you guys are doing it better than I think I would have done.
Not this guy. No, I should have had the same thought as you and did something different. But all I know is comics. So.
Yeah. So I thought, well, you know what? I think I'm more versed with books than I am with comics. So I chose to do that. And I remember the first episode was like, so long. And I was recapping it like to the T. I remember I had some people listen to it and they're like, wow, you really said everything. It was Neuromancer.
Oh my gosh.
And wow. I was like, well, this book had so much stuff in it and I just wanted everybody to know about it, and I tried to edit it down as much as I could. But I mean, I appreciated all my coworkers at the time who listened to it and gave me feedback. And they're like, oh, no, it's okay. It was long, but, I enjoyed it. And I said it was a book I wasn't going to read. So I was like, well, then I'm doing my job. That was like, that was my my mission statement.
Oh, Neuromancer is one of my favorite novels. So I would always encourage anybody to read it anyway.
Yeah. Well, I read it because it was supposed to be a movie, well, with Mark Wahlberg, who I don't really care for. But I had always heard about it, and that people always said it was so good. And then when it was supposed to be a movie with him, I was like, well, I want to, one of those people that if I hear a book that, or a movie's going to come out by a book, but the book sounds like something that I would like to read, I'll go and read it first and then watch the movie. And so that I wanted to read it first before the movie came out, and then the movie never happened, I guess. But at least it got me to read the book. So this was back in 2012. That's when I started.
Oh, so you started a couple years after I did. And then of course, I found out about your podcast through Peter Rios and his Daily Rios show. So, and I've become a big fan of your show ever since. So whenever I see a new Nerd Goggles in the feed, I'm like, yes, I get to hear about a new book.
And I do like, and I do like kind of in the beginning getting to talk about like pop culture and stuff like that. So that's kind of like how it'll start. Things I've been thinking about. Kind of stole that from Jimmy Fallon on his show. He would do something like that, something along those lines. And I was like, I really like that because that feels like very me. And so that's why I usually always start with like things that I've watched, things that I've done, whatever, and then move on to the book. That way, then if people don't want to listen to the whole thing, they have something else to listen to. Because I think we all like pop culture, so I figure that'll give other people things to listen to, or like not listen to the whole thing if they don't want to be spoiled. Get like the gist of the book and then stop. Like I don't blame anybody for not getting to the end and like not being spoiled or whatever. And I jump around all the time too and forget things kind of purposely for that reason. But so I learned after that first podcast.
Have you ever gotten feedback where it's like, I never listen to the end because I don't want to hear the ending of the book?
No, nobody has ever said anything to me. I'm actually surprised. I think you left me one a long time ago on Apple iTunes. I think that's what I think what Peter said. I don't know if you remember, because I was like, oh, I had I didn't get any kind of a notification that anybody had left a comment on the iTunes. And one day I was just looking and I had a comment. And then I think I had said something also like on Twitter. And I think Peter said that he thought that was your username. So I don't know if that was you or not, or if you remember. This was like early days. But nobody else has ever. I've only ever had one more comment, and it was from an artist on that. Because sometimes I do graphic novels. And I'll usually do, which I think I mentioned to you before, I usually just do the first. So if there's a series, I just do the first. I don't usually do any more than that. And the same thing with a book. I won't do the whole series. I'll do the first book I'll podcast about, and then I won't do the rest of the series, even if I read them. But one of the comic artists on the book, he commented at me, but he was upset with me because I wasn't a fan too much of his artwork. And it was mostly just like the colors. I still remember it. And he was like upset about it. But I was like, you gotta be able to face criticism. I can't, like I'm not gonna like everything. There's been books I haven't finished. I think I even podcasted about a book I didn't finish because I didn't like it.
Yeah, that's surprising that an artist would respond in that way.
I was surprised.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those are the only two responses. If anybody else wants to say anything, feel free, but be nice.
That's right. Leave great comments. 5-star reviews only.
Yeah, only positive reviews.
Well, so given what you just said, you talk about books. You sometimes talk about graphic novels, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about this book, Superman Miracle Monday, because it's a book. It's a novel. It's not based on anything. Well, sort of. I'll get to that later. But it's an original novel by Elliot S. Maggin that came out after Superman the movie and before Superman 2.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Okay.
Yeah. And so, it's like I said, it's a novel, but it's about our comic book, the premier comic book superhero. And so I thought, well, this is a great way to do a mashup between Nerd Goggles and Longbox Review, and we could just sit and talk about the book, and just take stock for this book for something that happened. I'm not even gonna do the math, but it's a long time ago. over. Oh wait, is it 80, 20? Oh wow, that's definitely over 40 years ago.
40 years, yeah.
So
oh my goodness.
But this was a favorite novel of mine when I purchased it, because I did buy this back when it was published in 1981. I was hungry for anything having to do with superheroes, whether it was in comics, movies, cartoons on the Super Friends on Saturday morning or whatever, and then to see a novel in the store featuring Superman, I'm like, oh, I got to read this. And then, and I only found out later, actually, probably when I opened this book up and you go to the oh, I forget what the name of that page is right before the title page. But it's also by Elliot S. Maggin, Superman, Last Son of Krypton. I'm like, what? There's another one?
Oh,
So anyway, so I read that too, but and ever since then, I've always am interested in and love to promote superhero prose. And in fact, you know how Amazon, I don't know if they do this anymore, but you can make lists, Amazon lists. And I did one for superhero prose that's out there.
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and it was just a bunch of the superhero novels that I had read over the years, and I just put them all together in this. I think it was like a 10-item list, and I talked about just a little bit about each one, and just to help promote that subgenre, if you will. Had you I assume not, but had you read this book before?
No, I hadn't read it before, hadn't heard of it before. And this is actually the first, like you said, superhero prose book. I've never read anything like that. I didn't even think I even knew they existed. I mean, when you broached the subject up to me, the first thing I thought of was Star Wars, because I've been wanting to read all those books that are like not canon anymore, I guess, ever since Disney bought them, but I still want to read them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the first kind of thing that came into my head. And I was like, oh my gosh, I never thought of even a book about Superman. So I was excited when you brought up the subject, because I was like, this is pretty cool. This is something that I definitely want to check out. Now that you've mentioned that there's more, I'll have to look at your list. I might have to go and dip my toes in some other ones and see how I feel about them.
Okay, I'll have to remember this. Maybe if I can find it, I'll include a link in the show notes if anybody's interested. But there's been so many more published since that. Maybe I should do another list now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
But I will mention another one just real quick. I believe it's called It's Superman, that I read several years ago. That is a really good, and I suck at this. I cannot remember the author's name. I have to look it up, but I remember really enjoying that. It's like it was done as if Superman. No, it was set in the late 1930s, early 40s. So I think it's pre-World War II, but it's the golden age Superman, if you will, in this story. But it was really well done. So that's another one that people might want to check out if they're interested in Superman books. But like I said, there's The Last Son of Krypton. In fact, MJ, today I was looking at Elliot S. Maggin's Amazon page, and he did one called LexCorp, or Lex. Is it Lex? What did you say? Corp? LexCorp? but it's about Lex Luthor, and he's the protagonist of the novel. And so now I'm really curious. I might have to get that book and read it just because I will say just right now, I actually quite like, for the most part, Elliot S. Maggin's prose style. There's some bits, and I'll mention it later, but that's like, oh man, why did you do that? But he has a flair with words, and I appreciate that. Okay, so once I asked you to do this, and listeners, I just want to say I'm so indebted to MJ for agreeing to do this, because I brought this up to her as a possibility. I'll just say a while ago, and then life happened, and I also forgot for a while, and then I'm like, oh wait a minute, I should see if she still wants to do this, even though it's been so long. And she graciously agreed to continue with the idea.
And I bought it as soon as you said it.
I know.
I bought it.
I feel so bad. So this book has been sitting in your to read list ever since I.
Yeah.
Now I feel horrible. But when I suggested this, and you looked at what this book was, what do you remember what you thought about it? Why is Eric asking me to read this book?
Well, my first thought was just like what you said, because my podcast is mostly books. I was like, well, this is kind of cool, and I do read comics, and I like superheroes. So I like Superman. I was like, well, this is pretty cool. This is right up my alley, and it's definitely I thought a great collab for us to do. So I was pretty excited about it at the time when you broached it up to me. And I still was. I still was. Even when you brought it up, I was like, oh, yay.
And so that's one of the things I wanted to ask you too. Since you just said you're a fan of Superman, how much of how much Superman comic book reading have you done over the years?
Okay, probably, well, less than, I mean, I have read a few. I've read a few action comics, of action comic titles, and then don't ask me what any of them are called. It was a long time ago. And then just regular like Superman comics. Some of them like some of them small world stuff. I mean, Smallville stuff
Oh,
because
the
I really liked the
continuation.
show.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they had like some graphic novels that kind of played off of that, or like were alternate realities of that world that I read too. Most of my Superman knowledge is mostly the movies and the old TV show. That's kind of how I started before I read any of the comics. I probably had read, excuse me, more Batman than I did Superman when I did start reading some Superman.
And so you had seen the Superman the movie.
Yeah.
Did you like that movie?
Oh my gosh, it was like one of my favorite movies as a child. I watched it so many times, like so many times. That one and Superman 2. Superman 3, not so much. I
Yeah.
saw them. I, we have like this because like my I don't have the memory of it, and all my parents can't really remember because Star Wars, the first Star Wars, I was born in '76, so the first Star Wars and Superman, they both went to the movies to see, and I know one of them they brought me, but I can't remember which one it was because I was little, and they can't remember now which one it was. So it was either I either went to see the first Star Wars in the theaters with them, or the first Superman movie. And then they did take me to see Aliens too, but they said that I was like in the little thingy and on the floor of the seat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Those little, those little things back in the day they used to put babies in. I don't even know what they're called now. And the little carriers, it's just on the floor there.
To this day, you can sleep with the lights out?
Yeah, they said I was knocked out that whole movie, so I
Really?
guess it was soothing.
That's amazing considering all the jump scares that are in that movie.
Yeah. But
Wow.
yeah, definitely one of my favorite movies. I saw it so many times. My dad had the soundtrack. We used to listen to that all the time when we'd go out places. Because my mom would work on Sundays, and so when he would take us, he was always taking us to like the beach or whatever. So he popped that in. He was really into like soundtracks of stuff like Indiana Jones and all that. So we were in Star Wars, so we were always listening,
Oh,
to all
wow.
those things. Yeah, and it was nice. Like we liked it. It was just nice and soothing. We just like, we're like, conducting our own orchestras in the car. So yes, the movie was a big impact.
That is amazing. I did not have that in my youth. My parents not big into pop culture stuff at all. In fact, I think I drug them to see Superman 2.
Oh well.
And then we were driving home because I didn't actually see Superman the movie in theaters. I had to watch it on, I don't know, HBO or something after it was released there. And then we went to, like I said, I convinced them to take me to Superman 2. And then we're driving on the way home. And I'm all excited, right? Because I just saw the greatest, at the time, the greatest Superman thing ever. To now, I think Superman the movie is a much better movie than Superman 2. But, Superman fighting Kryptonian superpowered villains in that second movie is just like amazing to, let's see, that came out in 82? I don't know. Anyway, I would have been 12, 13 at the time. So I'm ripe for seeing something like that and just thinking it was amazing. And I asked my mom, she's sitting in the front seat of the car. I said, "What'd you think?" And she's like, "I don't understand how Superman and Lois could, do that, do the, you know, that bit in there." And then I just sat back in my seat. I'm like, "Oh, she didn't like it." If she's thinking about
That's
those kind of
funny.
details, she's like, "No, no." So anyway,
Yeah, I was old enough for two, so I saw two, and we saw three, and then was there a four?
yeah,
Is there a
yeah. The
four
the quest
with
for
the
peace.
yeah that guy? So it's all the other ones I was old enough to remember to have seen. I was always so excited to see a new Superman movie.
So have you seen the other Superman movies that we've gotten in the last several years?
I haven't seen the latest one.
Oh, okay.
I think because, well, it was coming out at this, because I really liked Lois and like, and another thing, I've watched like all the Star Wars, I mean all the Superman TV shows, Lois and Clark, Young Superman, like all those. I've watched all of those. But I really liked this last one that came out, the with the family, was Superman and Lois, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I felt like I didn't want to watch it because I did like who was the guy that played Superman last? I forgot his name. The one before this new guy.
Oh my gosh, I
The
don't remember.
just his name, the British guy. Well, I liked him.
Cavill, Henry Cavill.
Yes, Henry Cavill. I liked him, and then I felt like he really gave off. Like I said, I was a big fan of Christopher Reeves and his Superman, and I felt like he portrayed. Like I feel like he not portrayed him, but I felt like he gave me that vision back of him, I guess. I even did a drawing where I put their both of their faces, like one half of each of their face together, and they almost just like melded into each other. So it was kind of brought me back to that nostalgia when he became Superman that Christopher Reeves had given me. And then I really liked the guy who was playing him on the show. I always forget how to say his name, Tyler Hoke or something like that.
Oakland, I think.
Hoke, yeah. And I know we always wish like the TV versions, well, not maybe you don't wish that, but sometimes we wish that the TV version of a superhero would get to play the big screen version. Like I wanted, like I did want, Tom Welling to don the suit. He didn't have to be in the big movie, but I just always hated in Smallville that they weren't going to give him that chance to don the suit. In all these years that he played that character and he wasn't going to don the suit. So I just felt like that Tyler that he did so well as Clark Kent, and like that show was so good, and it would like bring me to tears all the time. I really liked the family element of it. I thought everybody, like the kids, the people that were playing his twins, the actress who played Lois, I just felt like everybody melded so well together. And I just liked his portrayal of Clark so much that I wanted him to have that chance to be baby Superman on the big screen at least one time. So I was surprised that Henry Cavill wasn't going to do it anymore, and then this other guy got it. So I didn't watch it because the other show was still on, and he was still like my Superman at the time. So I will eventually watch it. And then I didn't watch Justice League. This Justice League, I still haven't seen it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it. I don't know why.
I have not actually watched a whole lot of that Superman and Lois show. But I have seen a number of the Supergirl series with Tyler as Superman. I did watch the first few episodes of Superman and Lois, and I've heard from other people that it was a good show. And so, with your endorsement, I really should probably dive in and watch that as well. So, but I gave up on Smallville after the first 3 or 4 seasons. So.
I was with it till the end.
Yeah, I can't do those those CW style of shows. I don't think I've watched any of them to completion.
I think that's what made like Lois and Superman. I mean Clark. What the heck is the show called again? Superman and Lois.
Yeah,
I think that's what made it so good because it didn't seem like your typical CW show. But things changed once Green Arrow came out. You got more of that darker, vibe going on. Like it was, a lot of people called it like the Batman that we weren't going to ever get on TV.
Yeah.
Because he was like Batman, like Bruce, like Bruce Wayne, that character. So I think, having that, and, everybody called it the Arrowverse, like you said, and then Supergirl came out, and then we had the Flash, which the Flash I didn't finish. Supergirl, I finished it all. And that one was a network change. And so it was, I feel like, Arrow paved the way for us to get like a kind of, I think, a better, fulfilling Superman show. Because all the other ones have kind of been fluffy. Lois and Clark was fluffy, right? Kind of campy sometimes.
Yeah.
Smallville was a, villain of the week type of deal. Most of the time there wasn't like a lingering story arc, whereas Superman and Lois did have that. and then the whole family element. It was just so, I just feel like it was really well done and integrated with them, with all the characters and stuff, even like the supporting characters and stuff like that. I thought was really good.
Okay. I have a final question for you before we get into the story itself. You mentioned you've read some Action Comics in the past, and some other Superman stories, right? Had you read any of Maggin's Superman comic books? Do you recall?
Oh, I couldn't tell you if I did or not.
And so that would have been mostly in the, like the late Bronze Age.
Yeah, probably no. No, because most of the stuff I think I read, probably some stuff in the 90s, and then most of it would have been maybe in the early aughts. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, definitely way past his tenure on the title. There is one I just want to mention. Maybe it'll intrigue people who are listening, or you, MJ. But there's a story. I don't remember which issue. I should know these things. I should look them up. I had time to look it up. I didn't. But there's one that he wrote where he wrote himself into the story, and he becomes the antagonist to Superman in the story. So he comes from Earth Prime, which is what they used to call the real Earth, even though it turned into something else later. But he came to Earth 1 and became the villain of the story, which I always found ridiculous. But ridiculous in a great way, because it's a comic book. It's the Superman stories of like the Silver Age especially, but even in the Bronze Age, even when they tried to make him more relatable and depowered him a bit and make it more quote unquote real. I mean, it's Superman. Come on, you can only go so far, right? But they're just bonkers stories in that era, and I mention this because I think this novel is a bit of a bonkers. It reminds me a lot of Bronze Age Superman, and which was Maggin's that was his time period. So yeah, well, I'll leave that to the scholars of the podcast to debunk or rebut. But we'll deal with that later.
But you did answer one of my questions, and was that I wondered if he had written any of the Superman comics, or if he just decided, I want to try to write Superman in a novel.
He does talk about that in some various interviews that I had looked at. And I think maybe I have some information along those lines, maybe not specifically later that I have for, one idea. We'll get to that at the end. But he definitely wanted to do this. This was something he really wanted to do. I can't remember if he said I think he said he went to DC and Warner saying, I want to write this Superman novel. And they did. They let him. They took advantage of this because they had nothing in the pipeline after Superman the movie.
Oh, okay.
So there was no novelization for Superman the movie because there was an issue with the rights with Mario Puzo, who wrote the screenplay. So he was supposed to write the novelization, but then something happened with the producers, the Salkinds.
Is that who wrote The Godfather?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And Puzo, and I hope I'm saying that right. And it never happened. And so Maggin had this novel all ready to go, I guess, and they published it in between the two movies. And then obviously they had the Last Son of Krypton novel as well. So there, that's kind of the sort of the backstory as I recall. So, consult your Wikipedias as you will for the right information. But let me start here by so I have, like I said, I have the original 1981 novel. Oh yeah, it does say here on the cover, second in Warner's series of Superman novels, of which there were two. I don't. So whatever. But it says Superman Miracle Monday, a day the world will celebrate if only Superman can conquer the greatest evil of them all. And then what I have on my cover is a shot of Christopher Reeve from one of the films. And then he's overlaid onto a shot from the battle in this in Metropolis with the three Kryptonians, and you see all these vehicles on fire and whatnot. So the movie hadn't come out yet, and we're getting a glimpse. And there is about the middle of the novel is close to the middle is a several page insert showing black and white photos, stills taken from the second movie.
Oh, wow.
I assume your copy, which you don't have a physical copy, right? You got the Kindle version.
Yes.
Yeah. So it doesn't have that, right? There's no photos from the taken from the movie.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, there aren't any photos in it at all.
And the reason that that's the case is because Maggin somehow got the rights to the book down the road. I think maybe Warner and DC were like, we don't know what to do with this, so they just gave it back to him, and he published it in 2017, I think it was.
Yeah, the version I have is 2017.
2017. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Does that show a cover to the book on yours?
Just this guy.
Yeah. Would you mind describing? Yeah, that's what I see here on Amazon. Can you describe what that looks like?
It's Superman. He's kind of all red, holding a woman with short hair, also wearing kind of red. And then behind him is some big eyes. And the title's it's kind of funny because the author's name is really huge on top, and then Superman is super small, and then Miracle Monday is like medium, and that's on the bottom.
Yeah. I don't want to disparage anybody, but man, that is a horrible cover.
It is. That's why when you were asking what version I had, I just assumed this was the original because it looks old.
So, like I said, 2017, he released this version. He's getting all the profits, and that's great. What I read somewhere, I can't remember where it was now, but the version that you read and the version that I have are a little different. And I don't know in what ways. So maybe as we go along, there'll be some differences there. I know that Maggin has said that he cleaned up some of the writing that he done. I think that there are some plot inconsistencies or confusing bits of plotness that maybe he addressed. No.
There's a lot of confusing stuff in here.
and the reason I say that too is the print length of your book is 250 pages and mine is only 205.
Oh, wow.
So he added quite a few pages to this thing. I'm really curious. Maybe 10 years down the road, I might buy this, hit this version and reread it. But just to see exactly. But yeah, so that's kind of the big differences between the two. So like I said, hopefully if you see anything that I happen to read, and it's different, you can let us know. I will switch to the backside because this provides, I think, a pretty good overall summary of the book. And then we're going to, as we go chapter by chapter, I wrote up really short, folks, really short descriptions of the chapters, just as a reminder for everybody, myself mostly, so I don't forget. And then we're just going to talk about the things that we like or dislike about the book as we go along, which is what MJ does on her show.
Yep.
All right. So Superman, he says, the Man of Steel meets a demon of fire from another world, another dimension. A hellish fiend escapes to test the Earth's greatest hero. Possessing the body of a visitor from the future and using the schemes and dreams of a master criminal, C.W. Saturn strikes at the heart of civilization, and the forces of chaos threaten to destroy the very order of the universe. But the devastation of the world is not the evil one's goal, only his means to the corruption for the last Kryptonian. The superhero, now stripped of his Clark Kent alias and fighting an enemy whose dark powers are as limitless as those of the devil himself. So, does that text show up in your book anywhere?
If it did, I didn't read it.
Okay, because let's assume not. When you hear that, who do you think the book is really going to be about? I mean, obviously Superman, but
Well, I mean, I'm thinking that it's going to be like the devil, the way you ended that, because that's the only thing. But that might be just how I was already picturing in the book since I read it.
yeah, that and possessing the body of a visitor from the future. So that is the character of Kristen Wells.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read. So like I said, I haven't read this book. I read this book back in 1981. I may have read it once after that, years later, and I haven't picked it up in decades. And I go to read this, and I read this thing, and I'm going, who's this book about? Because it doesn't seem like it's about Superman, even though that's the name of it, right? And I'll get into some other things here in a minute too regarding that. But I just want to float that idea out there right now. But I will say Amazon says that. Oh yeah, so here this is also why I wanted to point that out too with this Amazon description.
Yeah, because that's the description. Sorry to cut you off, but that's the description that I would have read.
Yeah, when an historian from the future travels to Metropolis to unravel the mystery surrounding the joyous holiday of Miracle Monday, she finds herself embroiled in events that threaten the stability of the universe and the laws of physics themselves. Superman faces down the devil itself in this best-selling novel. So again, I read that and I'm like, so it's about Kristen. But it's not.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it almost feels like with that, almost feels like the target audience might be females with that description, right? We're like, oh, we're going to have a female protagonist. I'm going to read this. Who's not Lois Lane, somebody different.
Well, I'd have to assume that Maggin himself provided that summary to Amazon. So why did he choose to focus on Kristen Wells? So again, that's just something I want to bring up because I'm going to talk about that later. And I don't know, did you have any thoughts as you were reading the book about who the book was focused on?
I felt like you, in the beginning, we learned about Kristen, and so I thought it was going to be more of her in there, but then we didn't really get too much of her. I don't feel like,
yeah,
especially in the beginning. But then I kind of felt like, was this supposed to be about Lex? Because we also didn't get a lot of the I forgot what the guy's name is. The main villain.
C.W. Saturn.
We didn't get that much. Yeah, thank you. C.W. Saturn. We didn't get a lot of him in there. Because the beginning you hear about him and then you hear about Kristen. So I felt like, okay, this is the intro. This is what we're going to get. But then there was just a lot of stuff with kind of I felt like shoehorning in of Lex Luthor, so that I was expecting that maybe he was going to be the kind of the big bad at the end. So yeah, there was just a lot of conflicting things, I think, as I was going through in the beginning of the book and what I was starting to think as I continued on.
Yes, conflicting things. That's a great way to put it. And that I would echo that sentiment because while I enjoyed the novel, I felt like there was a lot of incongruities. Maybe Maggin could have tied them up a little bit better or developed some things better. Characterization, I mean, he has it, though. He has some really great descriptions of people, the way they talk, which I'll talk about specifically later. But then, I don't know, I feel like some of the characters just get really lost in this novel. And I'm not sure who I'm supposed to be rooting for. I mean, obviously, it's Superman. You root for Superman. But I felt conflicted because I was really drawn to Lex Luthor in this. And it seems like he's being built up to do something really interesting. And then it seems to go away. And Kristen is built up as some important feature. And she is to a certain degree, but then it just kind of, I don't know. When I read this again, I just came away from it kind of confused, but also I enjoyed rereading it. It was a nice, easy to read,
Yeah.
a beach book, if you
Yeah.
will.
So, okay, let me ask you this. How many times have you read this book?
I'm thinking just three over the
Three.
years.
Okay. So I can see like this book coming out after the first movie and the excitement of the first movie.
Oh yeah.
Like if I was older, because clearly I wasn't reading this at all because I was like, like one. Um, or was it 1982? Or no, 1981 this came out. See, my sister was born, my younger sister, so maybe in like five, maybe. Okay, but still, this wouldn't be a book I would be reading at 5 years old. I could see if I was like your age, and then the excitement of the first movie coming out, and then there's a book. Okay, I'm going to get that book because I want to read that. And like you said, there wasn't really anything in between coming out between the first movie and the second movie, and this is giving you a little piece of something to look forward to, or to keep it Superman in the forefront of your mind. I can see that being like exciting to read, but reading it now in this time and just like the things that I know or the things that I've experienced or my background with Superman, I was again like I was confused. There was a lot, like you said, there was a lot of the starting of developing characters and then it kind of dropping off. There were some characters that I was like I didn't understand why they were so changed from what I know. Like Jimmy, I was like, whoa, I'm like Jimmy's like always like the buddy sidekick type of guy. And yeah, okay, I mean, I get that, maybe he wanted to make him a little bit different, but I didn't really like him in this at all.
Oh,
I wanted him to be more like, I still wanted him to be like his buddy, but he just seemed, I don't know, like, I just didn't like him. Like, he didn't seem like friendly. Like, he didn't seem like, like he really cared about Jimmy and all stuff. It was more, I mean, Jimmy, Clark. He was too busy competing with him, And I was like, I always liked the kind of like him looking up to him because now they're like peers. They're more peers because they're like closer in age, it seemed like, So whereas before it seemed like, Jimmy was younger. And so he was looking up to him. But I did like the fact that he didn't work for the planet or the planet. Yeah, is it the planet?
yeah.
Oh my
Days
gosh,
of
I'm
the
going
Planet.
to confuse it with Spider-Man. Sorry. Because I have a Spider-Man reference. I have a Spider-Man reference later on. I did like how he worked in as a journalist on television. I thought that was a cool concept. Keep him kind of separate from everybody else, kind of keep him a little bit separate from like Lois. So I did enjoy that part of it. But yeah, so we're probably going to agree with a lot of the things you were saying. There's just like so many confusing things or whatever. But it didn't make me feel. I started it, and then I was excited for Kristen because I thought, oh, this sounds really cool. They're like putting all this stuff in her head. She's like all excited about it, like what she was going to do. So I did expect her to be in there a lot more, even if she was. I mean, we did get like some of the journals and stuff like that, but even if that had been put in a little bit more, and we saw her kind of as like a watcher type of deal, like more in the background and like got to see a little bit more of her, what she was doing. I think that would have been a lot more interesting than kind of how they just threw her in there. Because that's what they lead you to believe that that's what she's going to do.
Yes. All right. So let's say those are our kind of overarching thoughts about the novel, and we can get into it. Since you just talked about Kristen and her journal, that is there's an excerpt from her journal entry. I think it's her first one. That starts the novel. Do you mind reading that little paragraph of hers?
Sure. Okay, so it starts with the journal. And it says, my typing speed is up to 52 words per minute. My accent, according to ancient video disc recordings, is virtually flawless. My grasp of Middle American slang and idioms is like solid, man. This studio where I'm living with the fake smog out the window is a real slice. As they used to say, parentheses, everything these days as they used to say, in parentheses. I'm as ready as I'll ever be. Now it's just a matter of convincing my professors they'll come around soon enough. Kristen Wells, 2057, May 1st.
Yeah. So 2857. It's a time travel story, right? That's what I'm thinking when I first read this thing. I mean, we get a little bit more of that later too in a later chapter. But then it kind of is and it isn't a time travel story. But there's so many interesting ideas that I think overall Maggin kind of tosses out, but doesn't really play with. Did you think so as well?
I felt like a lot of the times it was, I didn't know if he was trying too much to write a comic book story into a novel.
Yeah.
Like some of the kind of goofy stuff or whatever. And, of course, that could work in a book if you keep doing it. But it was like sometimes it would just be, like you said, like regular prose. And then sometimes it would just be very comic y, where it was just like these little fragments of things. And you know how comics are written. It's just like there's this little things and you have the panels that kind of go along with it. So you're getting like fragments of stuff that are fitting here. Where a book, you have a lot more that you can add into and descriptions and all that kind of stuff that you can add into the story or even like the dialogue and all. I feel like you have more space to do that than you do in a comic book. And so some of the parts that didn't make sense, that's what I kind of felt like that he was like, if he lost, like he was losing the plot a lot of the times, I felt like.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I don't know, maybe he had more, but because of printing restrictions or I don't know what, they maybe had to cut stuff. I don't know.
Well, if my book is 50 pages or 45 pages more than yours, oh, it's like, what, like you said, now that I know that, what did he add in here?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I will say, so Kristen Wells was based, Maggin based Wells on a previous character and idea from Superman issue 293 titled The Miracle of Thirsty Thursday. And this is the real basic plot of this is that historians from the 35th century gathered on August 20th, 1975, which I assume is approximately when that issue was released, to learn how Superman coped with the miracle of Thirsty Thursday, where a freak lab accident made everyone in Metropolis afraid of water.
That would have fit into this book perfect.
Just like any good writer, you steal the best ideas and put your own spin on them, and that's that's exactly what he did. So I appreciate that. I do. Okay. Anything else on the journal or Kristen Wells? I have a little bit more information about Wells later.
Okay, well, just a little bit. When I read that, I thought it was funny. So then I totally thought might be a funny book. Like she just seemed like she, she was into it. That's why I was telling you, felt so excited when I started reading about her because she was like all into it. She was already into like her character, or her alter ego that she was going to be portraying in the past. And so she made me pretty excited. And then she felt like she was so hip, so she made me excited for her character to be put onto there.
Yes. Yeah. My grasp of middle American slang and idioms is like solid, man. I love that. There's so much personality there. And, of course, this is a 29th century person's idea of 1981, slang.
Even though it does sound a little bit older.
Yeah. I love that kind of stuff. So,
yeah.
All right. Chapter 1 is called Thanksgiving. Jonathan Kent has a nightmare about his son Clark in which he debuts as Superboy, but he does things wrong. Superboy ends up murdering some thieves and telling the president he'd soon be taking over, among other things. Jonathan tries to dig up a lead-lined box of kryptonite he had buried years ago, but Superboy comes out of the ground, grabs the shovel, and swings it at his father's face, waking Jonathan up. Unable to sleep, he has a discussion with Clark, who is still awake and dissecting a grasshopper that Clark discovered had a virus attached to its nerve ganglia. Jonathan thinks that Clark killed the grasshopper, but is relieved when Clark tells him he did not kill it and expresses sympathy for the poor thing. Afterward, Jonathan sleeps peacefully. And okay, so I was very excited to read this because I'm a huge fan of Superboy. I'm a bigger Superboy fan than Superman fan, mostly because of the Legion of Superhero comics that I started reading around this time. And so the fact that this, because this book is set in that pre-crisis continuity where Superman was Superboy, and 20 years earlier he lived in Smallville and had adventures and all that stuff, and just seeing Superboy again, it's weird because, like I said, I've read this book at least two other times before now, but I still, even though I know all this, I was just excited to read Superboy in this book. One of the is that the opening line of the chapter? I think it said the boy would be ready, Jonathan Kent decided, when he was able to feel pain. And I thought, oh, that's such a great line, because you have a father knowing that when his son, which, as a parent, you don't want your kids to feel pain. Obviously it's unavoidable, and you do the best you can to help them through it. But the fact that Jonathan, wholesome Jonathan Kent of Smallville, USA, is thinking about his son in this way, I thought, well, that says a lot about Jonathan Kent, and also gives us a little bit about Superboy, and is not something that you would normally, at least, especially comics written then in 1981. These concepts were not around. So I give Maggin credit for giving a little bit of more of emotional weight to the characters.
And it kind of does have like two meanings to it too, because not just like emotional pain, but also because Superman's like invulnerable. So, it's like, what does he mean here? Does he mean like physical pain, or does he mean like emotional pain?
That's true.
So you got those two that you can grapple with, I think, when you first start the book. And I think that this dream, wow, I'm going to be honest, this might have been my favorite part of the book. This first chapter, because I read that and I was like, this is straight up like horror, And I was like, I haven't really read Superman when he's bad. Like I didn't read Red Sun. I know about it, but like I read this chapter and I was like, this is dark, and this is like a Superman, or like you said, Superboy, that I've never experienced before, and I quite enjoyed it. It was totally different for me.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, those dark Superman tales, like you just mentioned, Red Sun. There's been unfortunately several others over the years. I'm not a big fan of make Superman dark, make him angry, that kind of stuff. But I wonder if those comic writers may have read this and took some sort of inspiration for it, for their own stories, their own takes of a quote unquote bad Superman. So
I can
that's
see
interesting.
that there were parts of this, I think, that I had that same thought. I mean, I can't tell you what it was now, but
and I in my notes I said the brutality that's described is chilling. So I had a similar thought as you. I also wrote in here, this is what Superman would be if he wasn't the big blue Boy Scout that he has been portrayed as for decades. If he were like us.
And this is what made me think that the book was going to be like that. And so then when it wasn't, I was, like a darker Superman, because I was like, why is Jonathan dreaming of this? There has to be something that he's done already, just besides like maybe a fatherly, fear or whatever. But it was just so, I felt like intense and just so intentional, that I thought that this is where the book was going to go, that he was like a darker Superman, maybe not complete like the evil, but just having like a lot less empathy than I think that and caring of human beings that we know, or that I know Superman to have.
Yeah. Well, and again, just occurred to me, if we take the way that Superboy and Clark and Jonathan are portrayed here, with the fact the book was published in 1981. Oh, and by the way, I did look this up here. I forgot to mention Superman 2 came out in 1980. So this actually followed Superman 2, not in between. So I know people out there are going to be going, you don't know anything. So yeah, this followed that. But
okay.
where was I going with this? So let's assume that the book itself is set in 1981, which means Superman's been around for some number of years. Let's say approximately 20 years, 15 years, maybe. He was Superboy, which means Jonathan went through, he experienced the evil of World War II, and so all that stuff is all up in his head, and he's raising a kid who can turn rocks into diamonds. I don't know if he could do it at this point, but ultimately he could. And so how do you make a kid who doesn't feel physical pain and has all these fantastic abilities and could do those bad things if he wasn't his moral compass wasn't strong? How do you convince a kid with superpowers to do the right thing? And so I think that's what subconsciously Jonathan's working through that, and that's why he has the nightmare.
If you go back to Superman and Lois, they kind of delve with that with one of the twins, and like what he would do, what his powers and all that kind of stuff entail, and what he's going to do with it, and how he wants it. Is he going to be like this, like his father, or do something different, or be bad or whatever? And I think that's another thing that they did really well right there, and that TV show, and it's kind of going along with what you were just saying right now. That dilemma.
Mm-hmm. And if I didn't say it earlier, I think these first couple chapters are actually one of my favorite parts of the book as well. So mostly because it just deals with Clark when he's young, and I just really like that for some reason. Speaking of chapter 2, do you want to go ahead? I'll do odds and you do evens.
Okay. Chapter 2 is graduation. Clark is on the school bus when it hits a local farmer's dog. Later, he comes home from school feverish. This worries Mother Martha, who calls Jonathan home from work. Jonathan talks to Clark, and Clark describes the dog, Tim's aura, as it faded into gray emptiness. That night at dinner, they discuss the incident, and Clark struggles with his death and his inability to save it. At his father's suggestion, Clark puts up the supersuit and his parents made, goes outside, and vows that he would work for the preservation of life and never be responsible for the death of another, or else forsake his powers forever. Jonathan tells Martha that he thinks their boy is ready.
Yeah. So what were your thoughts on this chapter?
Oh, you know what? I don't even remember this chapter.
So let me read this little paragraph here, because this is one of the things that I liked about Maggin and his prose and the way he's describing things. And this whole thing that I'm about to read has stuck with me ever since I've read this the first time. And I'll explain a little bit after I read it. So it says here, Clark was thinking about that poor dead dog. Living things have a kind of glow around them, like a halo. Living happy things glow in one color. Living sad things glow in another color. Living intelligent things instill another color. Living innocent things in yet another. There was no name for any of the hundreds of colors and shades in which living things glowed. They were not colors that could have been seen by the eyes of whoever it was that had made up the names of the colors. The boy did not feel he had to make up names for them. He had no one with whom to talk about them except himself, and he would know what he meant without the names. But dead things, especially dead things that have lately been alive, look awful. They're all gray and empty. Their glow fades slowly as a mimosa leaf closes when it reluctantly decides that the sun is going down. Then after the glow is weak and gray for a while, it disappears, leaving behind a disgusting lump that is not much besides a disorderly mess of chemicals. There is nothing else like it. No metaphor, no analogy, just nothing, where there had been something that glowed. And I just think that is one delightful bit of prose on Maggin's part.
I actually did have the word colors highlighted over here. I guess I missed it when I was doing my notes. And I did like that part too. And I was like, oh, does he have like synesthesia? Because you know how people with synesthesia see like auras or colors of different people.
Oh, I've never come across that term.
Yeah. I think there's different types, and there's some that people can see like an aura around people, and then I think, what is the other one? There's another one that does like a color thing. I can't remember if it's a person's name, something. I don't know. There's like I think there's like different versions of it, but yeah. Or when they speak, they see like, or they see colors, something like that. I forget what the other part of it is, but mostly I think it's people will see like an aura around, and then they'll know like if somebody's like good or bad, or like, or somebody they want to get to know, or like the colors tell them like how they feel about this person, or like this person, like what their personality might be like.
Huh. So what I was alluding to earlier is that I don't know if it was this book where I first encountered this idea of, your aura, or if it was some sci-fi show or movie that I watched in which that idea was introduced to me, or some cartoon. I don't know. I'm thinking the latter, but that just that idea of being able to see someone's aura. And this actually, Superman in the comic, I've read at least one issue, maybe a few over the years, where he makes comments about this, that he can see this. And I don't know if it was in an issue that Maggin wrote where Superman first talks about it or not, but just that idea that Superman not only can see with his telescopic and microscopic vision, but he can see all, infrared and ultraviolet, but also all these colors of life. And I just that idea is just really cool. And I think helps set up what at the end, he's like, this is on page 26, silently and solemnly, Superboy promised himself, or who or whatever else might hear his thoughts, that his life would be devoted to the preservation of life. Elsewise, he would renounce his powers forever. This, to me, sets up the climax of the novel. Any other thoughts on that chapter?
No, I think I'm probably gonna have to follow you for the first half of the book, I think, after that, because I start to get more involved later on in the book, where I start to kind of get a little frustrated.
Well, like
with,
I said,
stuff that happens.
First couple chapters, I'm really engaged, and then sort of the middle part, I get less. I'm gonna say a lot less as we go into the middle, and then I have more to say at the end. So, all right, let's go on to chapter 3 then.
Okay.
Oh, that's me. I said I was on.
Your odds.
Chapter 3, The Watchers. C.W. Saturn, agent of the underworld, and described generally as, this is my note, and described generally as the Satan from folklore, is introduced and receives his new assignment from, I had to look this up because it's spelled Samael, and the best I can, I would say Samiel. But I always try to find the correct pronunciations of words I don't know, and I think it's supposed to be pronounced Samael.
That sounds right. That's how I would say it.
Samael, the adversary, which is, quote, the utter moral and physical destruction of Superman. In the year 2857, Kristen Wells is being quizzed on historical trivia while she gets ready for a date. A description of what Miracle Monday was across space is provided. Let me just read that real quick. On Miracle Monday, the spirit of humanity soared free. This Miracle Monday, like the first Miracle Monday, came in the spring in Metropolis, and for the occasion, spring weather was arranged wherever the dominion of humanity extended. On Uranus's satellites, where the natives held an annual fog gliding rally through the planetary rings, private contributions even made it possible to position orbiting fields of gravitation for spectators in free space. On Titan, oxygen bubbles were loosed in complicated patterns to burst into flame with a methane atmosphere and make fireworks that were visible as far as the surface of Saturn. At Nix Olympica, the 8-kilometer-high Martian volcano, underground pressures that the Olympica Resort Corporation had artificially accumulated during the preceding year were unleashed in a spectacular display of molten fury for tourists who walked around the erupting crater wearing pressurized energy shields. At Armstrong City in the moon's Sea of Tranquility, there was a holographic reenactment of the founding of the city in the year 2019. What happened to that then? Right?
Right, and it makes it sound so interesting.
When on the 50th anniversary of his giant leap for mankind, the first man on the moon returned, aged and venerable, to what was then called Tranquility Base Protectorate, carrying a state charter signed by the President of the United States. The prices of ski lift tickets on Neptune inflated for the holiday. Teleport routes to beaches and mountains on Earth crowded up unbelievably. Interplanetary wilderness preserves became nearly as crowded with people as Earth's cities. Aboard the slow-moving orbital ships that carried ores and fossil materials in slowly decaying loops toward the sun from the asteroids, teamsters partied until they couldn't see. On worlds without names scattered throughout this corner of the galaxy, where Earth's missionaries, pioneers, and speculators carried their own particular quests, it was a day for friends, family, recreation, and, if it brought happiness, reflection. So this is what the title is about. This is what Miracle Monday. This is how Miracle Monday is absorbed by the population in the year. Well, I'll just say the 29th century. I guess 2857 specifically. And I don't know if I mentioned this before. Miracle Monday is the third Monday of the month. Yeah, that's the preceding paragraph. So okay. we know that. And so Kristen is supposed to, or has volunteered, and that's why she talks in that slang in that first entry, her diary journal. She's going to go back in time because she and along with other historians are trying to figure out how it came to be. They know it happened at this time that the novel is set, but they don't know the specifics of it. How did Miracle Monday come to be? And so that's now set up for us.
That's pretty interesting, right? When you know how you know at the end, like what did happen. So the reason why they didn't know what happened is because she had to be there for it to happen.
Yeah.
But so they so that's a good setup. I didn't get that in the beginning of this. Now that you read it again to me, it's everybody else. I was like, it's clear why they didn't know what happened. Excuse me. And it sounds like more interesting now. I might have to go back and maybe reread this again myself or listen to the audiobook. Because I know that's why she went back. And that's the other thing. They didn't talk about the other people, the other historians. It was just her that we hear more about. But it didn't dawn on me at the time when I finally got the revelation, because I guess I must have forgotten about it then, was that it had to happen because she had to be there for it to happen. And that's why they didn't have it, because at that time they didn't know it. That's pretty cool. Okay. I'm gonna give him points for that one.
Yeah. I think it's mentioned near the end of the book that it's not just her; it's a bunch of other historians from the time. Also because there are other people that are being quizzed, or they maybe have a slightly different mission. I don't remember exactly, but but I think it's in this chapter where that is indicated. And I want to mention one other thing here. This is at the beginning of this. Yeah. The chapter is called The Watchers. And this is odd for Maggin. Did you ever get the feeling you were being watched? Most likely you were. That's the opening line of this chapter. He's addressing us as the reader. And that's weird. That's a weird thing because it's not been done previously, right? The thing I wanted to actually say was Superman was watched all the time by somebody somewhere, it says. As he was born, it was his parents, Jor-El and Lara. As he traveled from his dying world to the planet Earth, he was watched and protected along the way by the immortal guardians of the planetoid Oa and by their galactic task force, the Green Lantern Corps.
I like that part. I thought that was super cool.
Yes, it just opens up this whole universe, for someone who maybe didn't read comics. And you're like, who? What? Who are these people? Maybe they want to find out. I do recall that there is a comic book story, I don't remember which one, that actually stated that as well. but I don't know which one came first, this or that comic
Mhm.
book story, and was it written by Maggin? So that's now that I'm talking about this kind of stuff, like, oh man, I should have thought of this before and took more notes on this stuff, because now I'm really curious how much of himself he plagiarized in this book, if that's the case, right? Let's talk about C.W. Saturn, this agent of the underworld, because that's our antagonist now. What do you think of him? Because he's like the underworld's badass dude, right? He's their John Wick, if you will. I don't know.
I thought like one of the first things I think was when he said his name. I thought that was such a weird name. I guess with this kind of like with the description of him, or what in my mind how I was putting him in, or how I was thinking about him in my mind, like that name was kind of silly, but he seemed like he was so proud of it because he says it all the time. And so I don't know. Like he seemed kind of sinister, but then like so I thought like he would be like the big bat, but then when he started saying that he was like there was somebody else like above him, then I was like, okay, well I guess he's not the big bad. He's working like for somebody else.
Yeah.
So then I kept expecting then that somebody else to like show up too. That was another thing. And then they didn't. I guess I wanted more of that person. Or at least not they didn't have to really show up, like be the main bad guy because he it was like supposed to be him. But I think I wanted a little bit more to learn about who that was.
Hmm.
And I don't think we got that.
Well, I did, because the name C.W. Saturn is so unusual. I thought, well, this has got to come from somewhere, right? I could not find any reference from Maggin or anybody else, or even just like, is he borrowing, or taking a name and just kind of playing with it a little bit to spin
Yeah.
it to C.W. Saturn? I couldn't find anything. Uh, so if anybody out there who's listening knows, I really like it to know. I will. Let me read this too. This is a description of Saturn in this chapter. Saturn was neither man nor woman, not animal, vegetable, mineral, or energy. I thought, well, that's interesting. As this creature stood there across no time, the forms of 666 humans walked one at a time, 666, at a time, naked, stooping before Saturn and banging their heads on the obstructions that they could not see. They could see nothing but Saturn, although they were not blinded. That which existed in this place was simply not visible to humans, and this cluttered, limited universe looked to them like vast emptiness. So it's just this weird underworld. I liked how Maggin describes the place, but at the same time, descriptions like that just seem a little bit more poetic and not in the best way to me.
Mhm.
But you get a sense of Saturn is he's like a black hole to
Yeah.
the beings that he's literally stepping on, and he is their world in that moment. Otherwise, it's just this vast emptiness. So you get the sense of Saturn is very powerful. I think I'm supposed to think that, but I'm not seeing anything yet that demonstrates it.
See, when I read that part, like you're and maybe I misunderstood when I read that part because you were reading it as like you're describing it as like that's what their world looks like, and like he's in there. And then when I was reading it, I was thinking about how he moves on the earth, how he was
Oh,
moving around on Earth in that particular time because I'm still with Kristen, right? And how nobody can, and like you say, people were bumping into him, but they couldn't see him, so he's just there, immersed in there, and he's there, and nobody is able to see him as they're moving around like on our plane of existence. So that's how I read it when I read it.
I like that better, actually.
Well, it's kind of cool. Well, I like the fact that we both had like different visualizations of what world or how he was moving through the world.
Oh no, that makes it much more interesting to me. But yeah, I took it more at face value that he's in the underworld and these are the damned that he's stepping on. So I think if you had been his Maggin's editor back in the day, we might have got a slightly better story out of this. The other thing I was thinking about this, it reminded me of a couple things. One was this is like the Enterprise crew, Kirk and company finding God in Star Trek Five. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I think that. It's just Superman meets the devil. I mean, that's really you distill it down into its most simple concept. This book is about Superman battling the devil.
And I think that happens a lot. I mean, we see that there's always going to be someone that's going to, I think, take that route, who's going to write a story like that. Because we saw that also like with, well, I say we saw this, but I don't even know if you read these books. But I don't know if you read all like the Vampire Chronicles or the Anne Rice books.
Oh yeah.
But there's one, specifically Memnock the Devil, where Lestat is literally, battling the devil or whatever. But it seems like there's always someone that's going to choose that. And like they've always like religious wise, I know they and they've said this for movies too, where like Superman has always been like this kind of like a example of like Christ or whatever. That he's him here to like save the world, and then there's this like Christ iconography of him. Sorry, I said that word wrong. With modern day with Superman, and so I can see why maybe he would be interested in writing a story like that, because that's something. I mean, that's something like I know I've heard about when I was going to church. They would bring that up a lot about like Superman and stuff like that, which is you don't think you would hear that in church, but but I did. But I can see why that would be interesting when you want to have like the superhero that people will relate to, and then he's going to fight, the devil.
Oh, you just made me think of something for later. Oh, okay. This makes a lot more sense to me
Better
now.
write it down.
I know. uh, so okay, I was bumping up against this idea about, where do you go with well, and they didn't, because this is the second of two novels of their series, but where do you go with your protagonist once they've fought, the devil, or in, Kirk and company's that their devil in that movie? It's like, what do you do with that? Well, but that's not the point here. The Christ-like iconography you're talking about, I now see why they did. Maggin did something later on in the plot. So I will try to remember that. So I rescind my complaint about the fighting the devil thing for now. But the other thing I wanted to mention, I recall a Superman comic book story that I read decades ago. It was in one of those. Did you ever read those DC Digest comics?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, none of those.
When I was a wee lad, for 95 cents, you could get like 5 stories in this small compact edition of in the DC Digest. So I bought a lot of those because it was more bang for my buck. But there was one in one of those digests where Superman is tricked into thinking he died and gone to heaven, and was enlisted to fight the angels against the demons in the story.
Mm.
But in a typical, I think Julius Schwartz was still editing the Superman comics at the time of that publication. It turns out the demons were really the good guys in the story, and the angels were not. And of course, Superman wasn't dead at all, and he had ended up helping to defeat. I think they were aliens, in fact, that disguised themselves to imagery that would sway Superman one way or the other. So anyway, but you think about the weirdest things when you're reading a Superman story.
That actually sounds interesting. I wonder if that's. Do you know if that's something that we can still get now?
I don't. I would.
I'd have to search for it. Huh?
Yeah, I'd have to look it up. I'd have to figure out which digest that was, and then look up the story. But all right. Any thoughts? Any other thoughts on the Watchers?
No, but you can see now, I think, why I thought there was going to be more of Kristen like showing up and watching and like her point of view, or even like it wasn't even like it wasn't so much that I was expecting her to pop up more, but I think I felt like I wanted, do you say, like somebody kind of to notice her, like in the background.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like when it's like as things were being described or somebody's interacting with somebody, I wanted her to just kind of like just show up, like pop in, every once in a blue moon, and like somebody noticing her. So that way, us as the reader, we know why she's there, but they don't know why she's there, and she's just like some rando hanging out in the background. And so I, I just like I expected that.
Well, here let me read this too, since we're talking about Kristen, because this gives you a good sense of Kristen, because you need to have an understanding of her for what happens later. But as you correctly pointed out, after this, she just kind of is gone from the story for a while. And I totally agree. That was the wrong choice. Totally wrong
Mhm.
choice. Anyway, it goes like this. Kristen Wells was intense. She was also with it, liberated and foxy. Outrageously foxy. This is, oh, the slang back then. Kristen was all these things on purpose. Kristen loved disco dancing, and she ardently hoped that someday, against all odds, Sonny and Cher would get back together. I don't know if people know who Sonny and Cher are these days, but I totally get that reference. She had her hair redone every month the way the model on the cover of Cosmopolitan had hers, and she believed that the Equal Rights Amendment should be ratified immediately. Yeah, it should have been. She thought worrying about electoral politics was soporific. In quotations, it says, a drag, she corrected herself. She was indignant over, bummed out by, the exploitation of women in contemporary magazines, and she was extremely concerned with, into, the astrological signs of everyone she knew. And then she gets quizzed by her team, I guess,
Mhm.
for trivia, because she's going to go back in time and she has to know all this stuff. Even though, what was the popular name of Peter Noon? She was asked. I had no freaking clue. It's Herman from Herman's Hermits. So I was like, okay. So yeah, you get a little bit a sense of Kristen, the person who she needs to be in the past is, as well as a little bit of who, maybe not so much who she is, but what kind of language that she uses in the 29th century. I think there's a conversation. Yeah, she goes on this date with someone, and he comes back into the office, I'll just say, and he's having a conversation with one of his contemporaries. And the language that they use in the 29th century I thought was interesting. It was mentioned when your return to the apartment was seen by me. So this really horrible English, if
Yeah.
if I may say. Uh, let's see what else. Were they compensated for by you? Is another. So you know things. This is just Maggin trying to demonstrate that language has evolved over the last 8 centuries, 9 centuries,
Mhm.
whatever it is. So yeah. Anyway, I really appreciate that he tries to set up who Kristen is in her own time, as well as giving us a glimpse of who she's supposed to be in the past, even though he drops her from the narrative pretty much after this. And there's
Yeah.
one more pertinent scene with her in the past, but other than that, I think it's just gone. So okay, chapter 4.
Chapter 4. A shorty here. Superman stops a tidal wave from wiping out Metropolis, making it snow.
That's all this is. Yes.
And I actually, my little note on this one, I put it on the wrong chapter. But so this gave me some questions.
Okay.
My question was, where and I know I guess we're going to find this out later. This is one of my questions where we find out later. Where is Metropolis supposed to be? So I was super like confused. I was super confused where both Smallville and Metropolis were supposed to be in this book. So, I mean, I don't know if I was ever wrong, because in my mind, I always just kind of figured Smallville was like in Oklahoma or something. But I also thought that, I don't know why, but also I thought that Metropolis and Smallville were closer together.
Ah, see, that's the Smallville problem. This TV series.
Yeah.
They created that.
Yeah. So I feel like, I mean, because I know like he would fly, to and fro, and you don't really see a lot of the other people like traveling. Like you never really see how long it takes them to travel. We just know that he travels like fast. And yes, granted that is probably the Smallville problem, but I feel like I even remember that from even like the movies and stuff like that, because we never see anybody really traveling to Smallville, any of the other characters ever traveling to Smallville. It's always like him flying back and forth. So it always just made it feel like it was closer than I guess it actually is. But this book made it seem very far away. I thought maybe it was like maybe 5 or 6 hours away from each other, to be honest. But this was like states away. So I was really confused where it was supposed to be, because then he would talk about Metropolis, but then he would also talk about New York City. So then I was like, well, is Metropolis and New York supposed to be the same, or they're next to each other? So I was kind of confused where Metropolis was in all this.
So it's funny you even bring this up.
Especially to get a tidal wave.
Yeah. Because there is a conversation that Maggin has with a friend of his on one of the audiobook episodes. And I think maybe it was this one. I don't remember now. Where they describe New York as the inspiration for Metropolis and Gotham City. So in the daylight, New York is Metropolis. And at night, New York is Gotham City. Well, and you also have in the Superman Batman films, that we have with Cavill and, oh gosh, what's his name? Who played Batman and
Ben Affleck?
Affleck, yeah. They show them as across the bay from each other, which makes things even weirder. But according to, as best I can recall, according to the DC universe locations, at one point it was set up to where Metropolis was in Delaware and Gotham City was in New Jersey.
Okay, that's funny because when you said they were looking at each other over the river, immediately I thought of New Jersey and New York City, because you literally can look over the river at each other there.
I mean, ultimately, both cities are New York. I mean, that's where they set everything. But for whatever reason, DC decided not to use New York for the most part as an actual location in their comics, so they had to come up with these other things.
But they did use New York in this book, right? Like they said New York.
I think,
right?
And I think it was more with the Lex Luthor stuff, but yeah.
Okay, so that was what was confusing me, because I'm like, they're Metropolis and then all of a sudden they're New York. And then like we were talking about, I'd always thought that New York was supposed to be Metropolis. So I got confused when they actually started talking about it. Yeah. I don't know. It just really like made me, I don't know. It just really blew my mind, the whole rest of the book. It was a distraction to me, because I kept trying to figure out where the hell these people were.
And you bring up a good point, because there are these details, and especially if you're not, immersed in Superman lore, some of these things are going to be confusing because he doesn't provide context for it. He just assumes which is an approach. It's better. Maybe it's better. I don't know. But if you have to explain everything, or if you explain too much to someone, then I don't know, I think that pulls you out of the story too. But he also does that in this chapter, and I'll get to that in a second. But so I think that is a very valid complaint in some of the story that he's telling here. It's like, who's that? What's going on? I got confused and I'll talk about them when I get there. But there's some things in here I'm like, why are we even talking about this? Where is this going? And then you get sort of a resolution. Anyway, what I did like about this chapter though was this is the first action chapter. We see Superman in action, and I think he does a pretty good job of describing how Superman deals with a tidal wave, from wiping out Metropolis. He describes the powers and his strategy, and that's all well done.
Yeah.
But what you said before about a comic, this is like Maggin taking a comic book story and I don't know, fleshing it. I can't remember how you said it now, but I have that in my notes right here. This is the point where I'm like, this is like a comic book script that he just filled in places. And it's like, this chapter doesn't work all that well for that. I mean, he spent a page and a half in this chapter, this very short chapter, on what makes a tidal wave. He's doing exactly what you were commenting on, in that he's focusing on the wrong thing and giving us all these detail about a natural phenomenon that I would think 95% of the reading audience would know, but not spending enough time on other things that we need to know.
Yeah.
All right. Chapter 5, the announcement. Oh, good. We get to talk about Jimmy Olsen now. With Jimmy Olsen in attendance, Luthor announces from prison a newly discovered energy source that he intends to use to escape the prison. And so let me just repeat. You did not like Jimmy Olsen in this, right?
No.
Oh, see, I loved him in this.
Well, okay. I guess I didn't like his competitiveness with Clark. I just wanted him to be more his friend. Like I understood that he didn't have to be, looking up to him or whatever, especially because they were like a similar age, it seemed like. But I wanted them to be like more friends, and it didn't seem like they were that. And that's what I expected. And that's like how I know, like, how I expected, I guess, him and Jimmy to be. Like, just, didn't have to be the mentor-mentee relationship, but I just wanted them, I wanted him to have a friend, because it didn't really seem like he had any friends.
Yeah, very true. Well, okay, so this was at some point in the Bronze Age, they took Clark Kent out of the Daily Planet, and he became the Walter Cronkite of the DC universe. He became a television newsman for WGBS, and that's name checked in here because Jimmy also works for WGBS, and so that's the competitive thing, because he's trying to get the story one before Clark, and also he knows that Clark won't approve the use of the helicopter. I think he's trying to use, so he doesn't want to, because Clark, I guess, technically is his boss in this. And so, yeah, I could totally see why you would read this and go, why is Jimmy acting like this? Because this is not normal.
Yeah, so I wouldn't have known that, because I definitely haven't read any of those stories with Clark Kent working in a television studio or whatever. And that's why I liked it in this book, because it was different. So having that you had that background, that you already knew that. I mean, did you know that back then when you read it?
That's a very good question. I don't know. Possibly.
I think if I already had like that context, then maybe I would have thought about it differently, but I didn't. So that's why I think it bothered me, because every iteration I've seen of Jimmy Olsen, like you said, he's like the little cub reporter and like wanting to be like them. And even like this story with Clark, like, the fact that he's not even a newspaper reporter and he's working on TV is so, I don't know, that seems like more high regard, I guess, because he's like the main news anchor, and everybody like always wants to be like that main news anchor, and they have to start small to get up there, and or like if they want to work in like LA or New York, they have to start somewhere in Kansas or something, at a smaller TV station or whatever, and then to come back. Because I just had this conversation with somebody who was a producer, a female, and she worked in the news, and she started out as a journalist, and then she became a producer for news, and then she lived over here in California, and then she moved to like Texas and someplace else because that's where she got the producer, like her promotion for being a producer was over there, because she wasn't getting the job over here, so she had to go someplace smaller to get the bigger job to work for a different station. And we had like an interesting conversation about it, but that's like the I guess like what I was thinking about here. And so, that's the reason why I didn't like that. He felt like he was so mean to him, and I wanted them just to be, like buddies. And I'm just like repeating myself here, but I think though, if I did have that context that this was a storyline around this time, then I might have had a different thought about it.
But again, you bring up a good point because we don't see Jimmy and Superman, or even really Jimmy and Clark, having any kind of interaction. And we do get an interaction between Superman and Lois, too, in fact. But I have problems with those too. And it just seems like if you're trying to set up your protagonist, aka Superman, as this really cool character, you want to have him interacting with his friends and his enemies. And we really don't have that, except for a little bit with Luthor and CW Saturn, of course. And I'm frustrated by that. So.
Oh, okay. Here's another thing I didn't like. And since we're at this chapter right now, Lex Luthor. I didn't like him. I didn't like his story background. Again, I do kind of like the rich boy, whatever Luthor, the rich boy gone bad. I mean, I guess most rich boys are probably bad anyways in real life. But
yeah,
I like that iteration of him more than I like. And this is kind of the iteration of him in Superman and Lois that I didn't like either. That he was in jail and he was like a con man or a convict. And I didn't like it in that story, and I didn't like it here. I don't know. Not to say that people who aren't rich are not smart or anything like that, but I just felt like, I don't know, there was just something about it that just put me off, that I didn't get it. It didn't feel right to me, especially like some of the other storylines that I have read like in the past, and things that he's done and stuff like that. So for me, it didn't fit that he just kind of was like, didn't come from like a rich family, but he was doing all these bad things like since he was young. But I did kind of like the fact that he was like super smart and like, coming up with these plans all the time or whatever. But I guess I just didn't like the fact that he was in jail or in prison. But it just kind of reminded me of, and this is another thing this recently that I was watching on the CW. It was a Sherlock Holmes show, and like Moriarty's in jail. He can leave whenever he wants to, but he chooses to stay in jail and do like his business in there because I'm just guessing that maybe it kind of tricks people maybe into thinking like, oh, he's not doing anything because he's in jail, but he like is running the jail, and so he can leave when he wants to. And that's kind of the same thing I was thinking about with Lex. Is like he leaves. They mention all the time that he can leave when he wants to, but then he comes back. And it's like, well, if you can leave, why don't you just stay out? Why do you come back? But it didn't seem like he had any kind of like racket going on in there, though. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, it didn't seem like he was running the jail or anything. It was just like he would do stuff and then come back. Like if he got bored being in there, then he would just leave and do stuff and then, whatever. But yeah. So that was another thing I didn't like. I didn't like his characterization because I just wanted him to be, the rich genius, like bald guy, and not I didn't want him to be in jail. I don't know. Is that weird?
No, not at all. But I kind of like with Jimmy Olsen, I really liked this portrayal of Luthor because it was a bit of a mashup between his Silver Age mad scientist phase and the Gene Hackman's portrayal of him in the movies.
Mm.
With also a bit of a comic book spin on it too. The way he was in the comics then, because Luthor was always getting, he was in the books that I started reading in the late Bronze Age. He was the guy in the power suit that Superman would have to fight every once in a while, and then he'd go to jail. and then get out and then do more, back, always back and forth. And they kind of touch on that a little bit in this chapter and some later chapters as well, without, going into a lot of detail with
Yeah, see, and I
those
think
interactions.
anything that I read of Superman, I've never like seen him go to jail ever. He's always just out doing his things and plotting and, or creating things or whatever. So I've never seen what the stuff that I read. I've never seen that. So when I saw it in Superman and Lois, that was the first time I ever saw an iteration of him like that in jail. And now this is the second, and this preceded that.
Yeah.
So had I read this when we first broached this topic, maybe I would have had different thoughts about it. I probably would have still had the same thoughts about him in this book, but maybe in terms of Lois and Superman and Lois coming after, maybe I would have had different thoughts of that character once I saw him in jail.
Yeah, I actually do prefer, that whole idea of the genius businessman type thing. I mean, that really came from the John Byrne post-crisis reboot of Superman in 1986, I think it was, and they played with the whole him being that and being the mad scientist guy, and over the decades since then, but that genius businessman guy or version of him seems to have more staying power. So I think that's been most of the portrayals of him in other media as well, with a few exceptions.
I think it's too because we always see like this rags to riches things when it comes to people like that in storylines. They came from the streets or whatever, and then they've gone into organized crime, whatever, and then they build themselves up and then they become like the supervillain. So we see this a lot. And I think for me, that iteration of Lex as as the rich genius guy or whatever was different because he didn't start from the come from the streets or whatever. He already had all this stuff, all this money or whatever already put onto him. So it was, to me, that was different. And the other, than other people's story. Like, let's say, who's the one for Daredevil? I forgot what his name is.
Kingpin?
Yeah, that Kingpin, right? Because he came from the streets, right, and built himself up to be like who he was. And this is like opposite of him, kind of. Hopefully, I'm making sense.
Yes, of course. The one I want to point out in here, because you were talking about how Luthor would stay in jail and then get out basically whenever he wanted to, as he does in this book. One of the things I like though about this, because he can do that, is there's a paragraph in here where they're talking about the warden, who's overseeing the prison that Luthor's in, and talking about that warden's predecessors. They listed all the predecessors, what happened with them.
Oh, mm-hmm.
And one of those predecessors was actually Luthor himself in disguise. And the governor lost his job because if it was found out that. Anyway, I just love those are great little details that Maggin throws in.
The disguise stuff, that was some of my favorite parts of the book. I was like, when they would go into Luthor's story or story arc, and they would talk about all these other little characters and stuff like that, I was really engaged into it. And then it made me want that book,
Yes.
and then we go back into this, and I'm like, damn, I want to know what happened with it. How did he come up with this? And like, those were so interesting. All those little characters and, figuring out then it was, and then like, we see like the doctor, and then all of a sudden we figure out that it's really him, when they unravel it all. And I'm like, man, I wanted more of that kind of stuff.
Me too. And I'm wondering, is that LexCorp book that I mentioned earlier, is that?
Oh yeah.
Maybe we get that in that
when
book.
You said that. Mm-hmm.
So I'm definitely going to buy that now. All right. Next chapter?
Yeah. Demons, chapter 6. The film Jimmy took of Luthor's announcement is shown in the evening news, hosted by Clark. The warden realizes the significance of what is shown. Lois invites Clark to dinner so she can set Jimmy up with Kristen. 2 days later, Lois complains to Lena Thurl about Clark's abrupt exit from said dinner.
All right, we get Kristen again, thankfully.
Like, what page is that even?
This is
when she comes back.
This is we're in the 50s. Yeah,
Okay.
53 is this chapter. What I found interesting about this, there are like the first couple of pages, it's talking about people's demons. The chapter is named Demons.
Mhm.
Sherlock Holmes played the violin, as did Albert Einstein. Lois Lane wrote poetry and hid the pages in a corrugated cardboard file box whose inside she once lined with lead foiling. Jimmy Olsen took the name Marshall McShane to host a Sunday afternoon country music show. Things like that. Oh, yeah, here we go. Kristen Wells, Lois Lane's 2 day of work, Girl Friday, had a passion for discos and obscure volumes on recent history. So a whole bunch of things. But most importantly, Superman had Clark Kent. And this is the era in which Superman was considered the character. Clark Kent was a costume he wore.
Mhm.
That changed again in the Byrne post-crisis era, and Clark became Clark Kent was the character, the person, and Superman was what he became to do what Clark wanted to do in the world. So it was a reversal of back then in the 80s or early 80s and then to the mid 80s. And I think that version has survived for the most part the longest. They haven't really gone back to Superman being like the main persona of that duality of those two characters. So I don't like this. I don't like that Clark Kent is considered almost lesser than. It's not.
Mhm.
He's not real, so to speak. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, I did not like it. I know that it's the same thing with me. That's one of the things that I've learned, I guess, over the years or accepted over the years, where they would say that Superman is the person, and then, like you said, and Clark Kent is the costume. It took me a long time to kind of go along with that theory or that line of thought when I first heard it, because I didn't think about it that way when I was younger. So this was probably maybe within the last, I don't know, 15 years or so, when people started talking about it a little bit more. And I was like, okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense, but he's not really Superman, because that's the persona they gave him. And this is something I wanted to talk about later on too, was because because he is Kal-El. That's who he is. And Clark is, the other alter ego. I think, to me, I feel like that's the better description, because he's not Superman. But somebody else gave him that name. He didn't choose that name for himself.
That's true. You're right.
So to me, I get it, but then also I think, like, no, because it's Kal-El and then it's Clark Kent and then there's like Superman. I guess, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's who he really is. But I can see like where they were coming from, I guess, with this, because they take a long time to bring up his whole history and the whole Kal-El thing. That was another one of my notes where I was like, I guess I'll wait till we get to that chapter where they had like a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing I wanted to go back to was I kind of thought it was sad that they killed off both Jonathan and Martha Kent. That they both were dead in this book.
Yeah. And again, that reflects the comic book history at that time, because they were both dead. And, Superman, Clark was alone. Again, obviously that, again, Byrne post-crisis changed that.
Okay. Yeah. See. All right. So a lot of the stuff that I've read has been like post-crisis stuff then, because a lot of this, like, wait, what I'm seeing in here, and then we were saying that it's in the comics. I've never read.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask you, what is your demon?
Oh man, social media probably. Terrible.
Well, it's certainly demonic, that's for sure.
Yeah. Something I'm trying to step back from a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you, if I had to answer that question, I would say,
you got to answer that question too.
Podcasting. All right. Besides that, I will say, it's very important that Maggin here identifies that Clark Kent is Superman's, quote unquote demon. Let's see here. There is a short line in this chapter where Clark is reporting on the evening news about a plague of locusts in Belgium. And to me, that is the start of CW Saturn starting his shenanigans in the book, although we don't know it yet. Lois, this is where we first get Lois for a good meaty chunk. There's a conversation that I want to recreate here if I can find it. Lois is telling Clark why she wants to take him out to dinner, or asks him, busy for dinner? Me busy? Clark was genuinely surprised. You're asking me out to dinner? Gloria Steinem and Helen Gurley Brown both said it's all right. I figure I'd better do it. Of course I'm not busy. Terrific, Clark. I'm trying to get Jimmy to meet Kristen, that new girl who's typing the final... Oh, there it is. Who's typing the final copy of my book. You just make believe you're my date, all right? I'll try to put on a good act, he says. Anyway, this is Lois to me. This sounds like Lois to me. It's a bit of the Loises that I've read in the comics, the Lois that I adore in Superman the Animated Series, and the Lois Lane of the Superman movies. It's not quite... Oh gosh, what's her name? I'm so bad. Margot Kidder. It's not quite her voice, but it's close. So I appreciate that Maggin's just not aping the actors in the movies in his book. So I really enjoy that. What was your take on Lois, since this is the first real chapter we've had her in?
Well, when she was introduced, she was like the Lois that I recognized. Later on in the book, she was not a Lois I recognized. I didn't feel like her reactions to revelations were her reaction. I don't think she would have reacted that way, all emotional or whatever. I just didn't. She's always to me been that spunky woman, and I'm sure she has feelings. Some say that she didn't, but I feel like it was too over the top. That I don't think, like when she ran out of the studio or whatever, all upset, and I was like, I didn't feel like that was something that she would ever do. If anything, I think she would just like confront him, which she kind of does do. But I didn't like. I just didn't. I felt like she de-evolved as the book went on, and I didn't like that part because Lois is one of my favorite characters, and I always liked their kind of like, like jabs at each other or whatever, like the way that he was always, she would say something smart to him or whatever, and then he would just be like, or whatever. And I always liked that about them, and just the fact that later on she just like totally crumbles and is all distraught. I just feel like I don't feel like she would be that way. It was too much for me.
Yeah, I have issues with that particular chapter you're talking about. I'll reveal later, but yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm revealing now because I had a lot of thoughts about it.
I agree. There's something wrong with that, but here in this chapter, I think this is the Lois I expect. She talks fast. She is this is 1981, right? And also written by a guy. This is his version of a feminist woman in the workplace, based on 50 years of comic book stories about Lois Lane. So, the other thing I wanted to just mention. Two more things. While on the phone with Lena Thorell that you mentioned in the description, between Lena and Lois, it's when Kristen arrives at Lena's apartment, and when Lena sees her, she faints. Sees Kristen. And so I like how Maggin is setting things up, because we find out later that, spoilers, because we're obviously going in depth on this book, CW Saturn is possessing Kristen, but that's not revealed until several chapters later. And but Lena, because she has a sensitivity, I'll just say, sense something unholy
Mhm.
when Kristen was there. And then Kristen, of course, we see as, from her perspective, one of the very few times we actually see besides the journal entries, see a scene from Kristen's perspective is that she grabs the phone and it's Lois, and so she's like, I can't remember if I think it's Lois that says something about Lena being sensitive, and Kristen
Mhm.
goes, "Oh, in that case, I know what to do," and then hangs up, and then she gives Lena, I don't know, orange juice, and I don't know whatever it was, but but and Lois is like, how would she know what to do with this?
Yeah.
I just like that scene, and then also we see when we first see Kristen in this scene, she is doing a crossword puzzle when Clark comes up to talk to her, and he gives her the answer to it. In the scene with the previous scene with the warden, or no, I think it's later. I forget now. He's doing the same crossword, and so now this is where I appreciate Maggin's grasp of his plot and who's doing what and the connections between. It's a totally minor thing. It doesn't have any real importance, but it makes you feel like they are of a community. Even
Yeah.
though I don't know where the prison is. Obviously, it's not in Metropolis, but it's nearby, and so Kristen's doing the same one, and I will reveal here because of this book. So the 13-letter word meaning, quote, deliberately for dolphins, the answer is Clark provides it to Kristen, porpoisely. I would, for years afterwards, I would use that as a kind of trivia question for people to get them to try to answer to guess the word porpoisely. But I would say it like Curly from the Three Stooges. I would use the word purposefully to mean purposefully, but I would say it like Curly, purposefully. Oh boy, that sounded bad. Purposefully. There we go. That's a little better. Stupid juvenile things.
That's funny.
Okay, now so chapter 7, the discovery of magic. Now we get into some really cool things of the book, I think. While Lex prepares to escape prison ahead of schedule because of what was shown on the news, I guess maybe I should talk about that a little bit. We get a bit of Lex's history when he lived in Smallville and sort of became friends with Clark Kent. We learn of gas waves, aka ectoplasm or souls, and that is what he uses to walk through the prison walls as a free man. So Lex just basically ponders where thoughts go. And as the super genius that he is, he figures out that they are gas waves, and gas waves are what other people, lesser intellects, would call ectoplasm or souls. And so he prepares his body by flushing out inorganics as best he can. And he's on a strict diet to try and do this. And then basically, would you say what's not levitation? What am I trying to think of? When you meditate, meditation. He basically meditates himself into the astral plane and just walks out of prison. So there's that. And the how to schedule bit and what's shown on the news is that while he has that news conference earlier in the book, he lights a match to start his pipe, and then lets the match go, and it flickers down. The reveal of that is because they describe it, and I think it's in this chapter where I don't know, I can't remember which chapter it is, but the warden realizes what's going on, and then Superman is distracted by, I think, the next thing in the next chapter. But he realizes it then, and it's that there is a draft in this prison where there shouldn't be. I still don't understand the significance of that draft. I think this is a plot hole. What did you think of that?
Oh, I'm trying to think because Clark doesn't notice it until he sees the video, right? Because, like you said, he was distracted. And I think he watches the video, and then that's when he realizes. But feel like I think that they said in the beginning that that room was supposed to be airtight
Yes,
because
that
didn't
is
somebody
true.
else try to smoke something or try to light something that was like when Jimmy Olsen came. I don't know if it was him or one of the other guys were trying to do something and they weren't
Yes.
supposed to, and I told them that it was like airtight. So for there to be any kind of air in there, then it means that the room wasn't either the room wasn't airtight or something was letting air in there.
Right.
But I don't think I knew something was significant when it happened, and then when Clark saw it in the video, I'm trying to think back of what I was thinking.
Well, it to me it's like it seems to be tied to his escape, but I don't understand why
Mm-hmm.
because he walks into this astral plane.
Because then maybe the astral plane was where the air was coming from because
I
he had to go
guess.
through thingy. I don't know.
Yeah. Like I said, I think this is one of those things that maybe Maggin wanted to revise a little bit because that doesn't make any sense to me. Or I just and I've reread this chapter multiple times now, and anywhere where they talk about this match thing, I'm like I'm reading it because I'm trying to figure it out, and I just can't. Maybe I'm just stupid.
If it was something that he added in, then it definitely wasn't like in this chapter. It definitely was
Yeah.
when Clark was watching the video, which I don't think was in this chapter,
No.
that they alluded to the air, but I can't think of what it was right now.
Otherwise, the whole idea of gas waves, which is an interesting descriptor,
Mm-hmm.
but it made me think of like dark energy or dark matter, right?
Yeah,
That's our scientific theory
that's what I
now
thought it
as
was going
far
to be
as yeah,
originally.
right. So had Maggin written this, decades later, he might have used dark energy as that, which dark energy, underworld demon, it kind of fits in a way. Also,
Or like Icar or something.
yeah, yeah. There was an issue of Superman where he developed a new superpower, which was to walk through walls.
Oh, really?
I think it was only used in that one issue, and it was quickly forgotten.
Well,
And then the other thing I liked about this chapter was during the Smallville portion, where they
mm-hmm.
talk about what a bad boy Lex was, now being
Yeah.
stuck in Smallville, and like you were talking about earlier, he's a kid who comes from nothing and an abusive uncle, I think it was, or abusive family situation, and he acts out and does these elaborate things, and Lex would tell people, "Don't trust me," and that
Mm-hmm.
comes back later with Clark Kent. So again, those little repetitions that Maggin throws in there, I just like how he does that.
And I like how like Clark would always just like show up, like whenever he did something, and then he
Yes,
would be like, "Why is he like always here?" And again, see, that could have been something that like Kristen should have been doing. You know what I mean? Like somebody did something and then she just shows up like randomly.
right.
It's more like Clark was Clark is doing Kristen's job in regards to Lex. But I did like that whole plot line too, seeing him as a child, and then he wanted to work for the governor or whatever, and then he was upset that he didn't get chosen, so he was going to do the whole thing with the cows,
Oh yeah,
like all that, all that whole, like you said, that whole background right there. I did enjoy that too, like seeing how his brain worked, a little bit of the tinkering, and then just how like he, like Clark didn't really do anything, like literally didn't do anything at all, but he already in his mind like he was making him like his nemesis. You know what I mean? Like Clark didn't really do anything, but he just would show up and just like, and not really like, he didn't like tattle on him or anything like that, or try to get him in trouble. Like he actually took the blame for the other thing, for the cows or whatever. But it was like the fact that he did that, then it just made Lex like mad. So he was like, I feel like he was like projecting all of this thing that Clark wasn't even doing. But I did like, I did enjoy the way like he was describing it though. It's just, it kind of did give me a little bit of a chuckle because I was like, Lex, you're just doing this all to yourself. You're just like making up of this whole like rivalry, or I don't know what you're doing. And Clark is just like, woo.
Bumbling,
Yeah.
quote unquote, into the
Yeah.
situation. He's kind of Lex's guardian angel, or trying to be anyway, and it's not really working out, but doing the best he can. But this sets up a later revelation from Lex's point of view about his time at Metropolis University with Clark, and that's again, this is an example of Maggin layering things on to build up to other moments that are more significant or reveal something about the character. So at least Lex Luthor anyway, because it almost seems like he wants to write a Lex Luthor novel instead of a Superman story. So
Right, chapter 8.
yeah, chapter 8.
Chapter 8, Liquefied Natural Gas. Superman deals with LNG leaking from a ship in Metropolis, then performs heroic acts across the world before realizing the significance of the match in Luthor's announcement. Okay, so it's the next chapter then he says that.
And this, to me, this chapter is, again, wait, let me preface this. I just found this out today, MJ, because I was speed listening through Maggin's audiobook version of this to see if there are any details, little tidbits, revelations or whatnot, and there really aren't. But for this chapter in the audiobook version, he wrote in the show notes. This is the only thing he wrote in the show notes. Now let me show you how to write action. And I think he did. This shows Superman doing Superman-y stuff. And I liked it. I thought it was a really well done description of Superman's powers and how he would deal with this catastrophe waiting to happen, and then everything else he's dealing with.
I still have some. So I had some notes here. This one, just real quick, I'm just going to read what I said. I had two quotes. Okay. So one of the quotes that I had was, he was sure that his presence on Earth was the reason they took those gambles, and that was what infuriated him.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, this was one of those points where I felt like so then I said, I thought this quote was interesting. In his mind, he believes that humans only take these risks because they know Superman will fix him or save him. And then I put God complex. This is where I almost felt like, I felt like this was kind of going back to Jonathan's dream, but not as scary as Jonathan's dream. But I kind of got like this feeling of Superman where he was like, everybody's like depending on him or whatever. And, or not depending on him, but people are just doing all these things. And then because they know that he's going to be there to fix up their mess or whatever. But like the way he was like, his attitude, and I can't describe it, the way like that it is in the book, but just the way like he kind of was like wording these things, I was like, wow, I see his ego here. I felt like it was his ego, and which is not something that I'm used to. And that's what I was saying. Like I felt like it was kind of harking back to Jonathan's dream, where he's kind of putting himself, instead of like where he's Clark, when he's Clark, he's like this with everybody, like equal with everybody. But then when he was Superman, he's putting himself like this. But then the iterations that I know of Superman, he's still more humble, even though he knows that he has these powers and he is, he can do all these things that other people don't. He doesn't like portray that. But we don't get a lot of, some of the things that I've read, whatever, I don't feel like we get a lot of in his mind, maybe. But like here, it just felt like very egotistical, and that was like not a Superman that I was used to.
Mm.
So the other quote I had was, these deposits, mostly infinitesimal bits of aluminum from cookware that get into food, are permanent fixtures in the body unless drastic measures remove them. This was in regards to Lex, which I thought this was interesting because there's a few things now towards the end of the book that are super relevant today. And that's like everybody's obsession now with like microplastics.
Mm-hmm.
So immediately that made me think about that. When I read that part of the book, it just made me think about like, situations that are going on today with like I said, originally it was just with the microplastics, but since having read the book, now these other things have come into play with putting stuff into your body.
Well, I can tell you, when I was a kid, This is before we had Teflon coated pots and pans,
Mhm.
or any kind of covering on pots. So all the pots and pans were, metal, aluminum in some cases, right? And that's what I was used to seeing my mom cook with. So she would put food in these metal pans, and then scoop things out with a metal spoon. Of course, we didn't really think about it then, but little shavings of metal are actually
Yeah.
getting in, and that's what I think that's what Maggin's getting at is back then we didn't have more sophisticated cookware, and so we were actually ingesting this metal, and it's going to stain your body forever because it doesn't break
Yeah.
down unless you are Luthor and you can walk through the spirit world.
Yeah, I couldn't think of what would have been because I when I read it, I was thinking how like it's relevant now
Mm-hmm.
because of the microplastics, but I couldn't think of what would have been that equivalent then.
Oh,
But yeah, you're right with metal because then I was thinking like it's also asbestos is always in things
oh yeah,
and then it's in people's bodies. But it's just funny how like a generation worries about this going into their body, so and then all these years then nobody worries about anything, and then now we're here, and then now it's microplastics.
yes.
So it's just funny how there was then and there's something later on too that I feel like I kind of felt like that was like kind of relevant to today too.
Well, and also given my recent knee problems, reading that again now, 45 years later, and the way that Luther describes, I don't know if he did it in this chapter or one of the other ones, but the pain he feels because that metal was extracted from him,
Oh
right,
yeah.
forcefully when he walked through that area, and it's like, oh, that's what that feels like now. So, okay, anything else?
No, that's all I got.
Okay. That was 8. I'll do the next 2, and then you can do
Okay.
10. So this is an interlude. It's Kristen's journal. Yeah, from the Journal of Kristen Wells. She makes an entry in her journal showing she is forgetful and is having blackouts of some kind. She gives her side of her introduction to Lena, where Lena told her that, quote, there were 2 strong opposing forces battling for control of my psyche. At the end of her entry, she admits to being afraid of what Lena told her is correct. So she's now starting, she's a little, I think she's just a little freaked out by a little bit, but she is, this to me indicates she's sensing something
Yeah.
that's going on, but she's not, she has no idea what's going on either way. So, and I thought this, it kind of sounds like like something out of a Stephen King novel, perhaps, building up that tension and the horror aspect of it. Someone who is maybe slowly losing their mind.
And this is the first time we've seen the journal since the beginning.
Correct.
So that's a pretty long gap.
Yeah, exactly. And that goes back to what we've been saying about her is like she's there at first, disappears for a while, has a few interludes, and this is going to be, I think, this is going to be it. Oh no, this is going to be it for a while for her. So, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. All right. Any other thoughts about the journal entry?
No.
Okay. Chapter 9, The Warning. Superman receives a letter delivered by Lena. It's from Max Maven, a mentalist who threatens to show Lena her birth certificate if Superman doesn't meet with him. When Superman arrives at the Magic Castle, where Maven is, he is escorted in by Ray Bradbury. He eventually meets with Max, who warns him about CW Saturn.
First off, I'm going to say I have been to the Magic Castle.
Oh, really?
Yes. Back in my 20s, my sister, my middle sister, the sister that's after me, she was dating a guy who wanted to be a magician for a little bit. So he started doing sleight of hand and all this kind of stuff. And he met, because you can only go to the Magic Castle if you're invited by another magician.
Oh, that's that place. Okay. That I have heard of it. Okay.
Yeah. So he got invited and we were going to all go. It was going to be me and my ex or my boyfriend at the time, and then her and him. But then we found out last minute that you had to be 21 and over, and she was 20. And so she couldn't go. And then so there's the three of us went, and then there's all these different rooms, and they have like main kind of not like big huge main stages, but they have some stages that are like main stages that you can go into, and then there's like an underground thing, and people are just doing like people are literally just doing magic tricks anywhere, sleight of hand or whatever, card get the cards and all this kind of stuff. It was really pretty interesting. Like we had dinner first, and then we went through all these different rooms and stuff like that, and went downstairs and you know checked out all the other magicians or people that wanted to be a part of that you know um, that club or whatever. And it was pretty interesting. I'd like to see how it is now, because this was back in the 90s, probably late 90s, so it has to be different. I mean, I think the rules still apply, but I'm sure that it looks different, and maybe like the way they do things are different. But it was definitely an interesting experience.
So does that mean that you knew of Max Maven, the actual magician or whatever, illusionist or whatever you want to call him? Because I did not know he was a real person until today.
His name sounded familiar, but I just thought maybe it was from comics. So I didn't know. I did not know. I mean, I know Ray Bradbury is real, but his name did sound familiar. But I didn't bother to look it up. I should have.
Yeah, I just assumed it was just some made up character that Maggin threw in here. But again, in the audiobook, this is one of the very few nuggets of extraneous information that he throws out. That Max Maven is cool. a real magician. I looked him up. He died in 2022. He was
wow.
He was on various television programs, performed all across the world. He was even, oh my gosh, I may have seen him he was in an episode of Mork and Mindy. And since I watched that show religiously, I'm sure I watched the episode, but I have no recollection of it. So yeah, I like that. I like now that I know this today, that Maggin threw in Max Maven and Ray Bradbury, name checks those two characters, and the fact that in this chapter it's revealed that Superboy read, I think, the Martian Chronicles, and he was so enamored with it that he flies to wherever Ray Bradbury is and meets him, and then they go spend the day at Disneyland.
Oh,
it's so cute.
That's cool. Oh yeah, his face looks familiar.
The significance of this, though, is Maven. Oh, and I don't want to. I have to wonder, did either of those men know that Maggin threw them in here, and did they have any problems with that? Because I mean, I don't know. I would think that might be a potential legal issue. I don't know. But
well, especially because Max comes up a few times in this book.
Yeah. But this is where Max shows Superman magic. So if we haven't, as the audience of this book, if we haven't accepted the fact that there is magic in this world by the fact, just due to the fact that CW Saturn is a demon, and so I always thought that was interesting. That I think this is the chapter where Max does the trick where you wrap up a newspaper and then you pour the milk in, and then Superman tells him, "Oh yeah, you just there's a balloon where it goes into," and that's the trick that's revealed. But then he does it again, and there's no balloon, but the milk still disappears. So he can do actual magic. It's just like, okay, magic is real, but okay, what is Superman supposed to do with that? Type of thing. But that's fine.
It probably was just trying to hint. It probably was trying to hint to lead up to what Lex was up to, because since Lena is Lex's sister, so I think it was just like kind of trying to tie some of that storyline together.
Okay, all right. I think this is one of those things that Maggin should have tightened up a little bit more.
Could have been better, yeah.
Which brings me to my question for you about this chapter. Do you believe in magic?
I believe in magic.
Whatever that means, right?
Yeah, that's such an iffy question because I do like to see magic and I do like the illusions and all that kind of stuff, but
Hmm.
there's always the part of me that still has like those, I don't want to say fears because it's not a fear, but let's say those apprehensions because of religion where like magic is evil or
Right.
whatever. I mean, I don't really think too much like it's evil, but then at the same time in the back of my mind, like the stuff that David Blaine does and how he gets like his eyes kind of go like, and he looks like he's like possessed or whacked out. Stuff like that, that kind of freaks me out. But I do think it exists. I think that I mean it falls into the vein sort of like also like miracles
Hmm.
or whatever, because a miracle could be magical. And I think it all depends on like who's doing it and what it's used for. And magic just kind of gives it like a pretty name, I think.
Okay. Yeah, this is one of those things where it's like these are questions that my kids would ask me when the topic gets brought up, and I'm like, well, I really want to believe in magic. I want to believe in leprechauns and angels and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know. I'm too much of a pragmatist to let myself go enough to really embrace the idea, but I really want to.
Yeah, it is. It is like and it is kind of weird because how can you, if you think about it, like how can you believe one thing exists but then another one doesn't?
Yeah.
So it's almost like if you're going to believe, then you have to believe that all of it exists
Yes.
in some form.
And I have a whole issue with belief. So anyway, okay. When you're ready, unless you have other notes about this chapter, go ahead. We'll go with chapter 10.
All right, so chapter 10. Superman takes Lois on a date to a hot spring in Utah. That was a cute chapter.
Yeah, it was cute. I thought it was a lovely moment between the two,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It just comes across as a, I don't know, a really chaste teenage romance instead of adult. I know, maybe this is one of those things where things are about to get hot and heavy, and then they switch scenes, right? So I don't know what. The whole point of the chapter is to show, hey, Lois and Superman have a relationship,
Yeah.
but he took her to a hot springs, and I don't know, did he strip down to just his trunks? What exactly happened here, right? I'm like, I don't know. It was nice. It was a nice little
It
moment.
just made me think of that scene in the movie in the first Superman when he flies with Lois and they're just like,
Oh
another
yeah.
nice little moment. Like, is it take it or leave it? This was like a chapter or like a part of the book that it could have done without.
So
I mean, they already had their date, so we already know that their date, that's not a date, but
mhm.
I don't think we really needed to see them go to the hot springs because it felt like that was already done already. We
Mm.
already saw like that kind of cutesy little date thing from the movie. I mean, if people who read the book watched the movie at the time. So.
Well, I thought it was interesting because it just occurred to me actually. In the first movie, they go on that, like you said, that little flying scene, and Lois is falling for him, and he
Yeah.
he, unbeknownst to her, already has fallen for her because he knows her as Clark. In Superman 2, they do get hot and heavy, and he ends up losing his powers because of it. And
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
this is kind of like the intermediate point of their relationship, but it's not really set in that movie universe, so it doesn't really work out. But anyway, I just I thought it was it was cute, but I don't. Do we need that? I think it could have been done a little differently, perhaps.
Yeah.
I have another question for you.
Okay.
Sorry to pepper you with all these questions.
No, it's
Um,
okay.
what is your ideal date, if you want to answer?
My ideal date. I like to do competitive things.
Really?
Yeah. I haven't done it in a long time, unfortunately. Some of my last dates have been mostly like coffee dates or whatever, which I don't mind. But I like going out to like play pool. That's one of the things I do like to do. I feel like you can get to really know a person if you do something like competitive, because like if they're super like an a-hole or whatever, you're gonna find out. Especially when a woman beats a man. And I
Yeah.
have always grown up as a tomboy. I've been not to like TMI or to do a sob story, but like I always had male friends. I would always play like sports at school. I remember one time playing kickball and this kid kicked the ball at me and I caught him out. He ran the bases and then he came and I was in the outfield. He ran the bases, then came after me and punched me in the stomach. Well, I'm sorry, he didn't run the bases because I caught it. I caught it and then he ran out to the outfield to come and punch me in the stomach because
Oh
I
my
caught him out.
God.
And I was like, and because I was a girl, and I was like, I still remember it vividly because then all my friends that were boys went and beat him up. It was during PE. Yeah. And so, I feel like you really get to know a person if you take them to do something competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And, I like to compete in things, but I'm not like, what do you say? I don't get all crazy about it. Like I like to do my best and I try to encourage other people because people used to always tell me like I was like a cheerleader type of thing. But, if I see somebody getting, like I said already, getting crazy or mad or like whatever, that I beat them or just like, I don't know, you just get to know a person when it's just the same thing. Like if you go to sports, you go to, and you see how people act, you get to really see how a person is. And I think doing a sport or an activity like that, you really get to see if that's the person that you want to be with.
I think you're onto something here. I never thought of it that way. But yeah, you're right. That's a really good way to see how they behave in whatever the situation is, right? Whether they're winning or losing, whatever. Yeah. I'll tell you what, I will reveal that had I known that my wife was such a competitive person with games and she was such a sore winner and loser, no, I wouldn't have changed any decision along the way. But that's why we don't play tabletop games together. She is so competitive, and it seems to have trickled down to our daughters. They're the same way, and when they're playing together, I was like, I'm out of here. You guys let me know when you're done, and I'll console whoever is the loser in the end because it's gotten bad a couple of times, like really bad. So my wife loves it when I talk about her like this on the show.
That's funny.
So in case she ever does, she doesn't listen to the show, but if she ever did, I'll say, to bring it back around to me, my ideal date is with my wife. So there we go.
Good answer.
Anyway, all right. Anything else on the hot springs chapter? All right, chapter 11, the auction. Another great Luthor chapter. Luthor creates a distraction at an auction in order to retrieve one of his devices that looks like modern art. Leaving the auction, he is addressed by C.W. Saturn. And this is where we get this elaborate setup. A performance. It is a what do they call those? It's like almost like a flash mob type situation. Back in 1981, though, where Luthor has set up these actors to portray some characters as a distraction of some kind, so that he can acquire one of his inventions that is in the museum, Metropolis Museum of Art or something. I don't remember exactly where it was, but. And I'm like, that is an element of Luthor that I've never encountered. And I think it's such a wonderful idea. And I don't know. Oh, yeah, this is the chapter where he talks about using multiple identities to enact his schemes, whatever they are. And more importantly, he believes Superman does the same thing because why wouldn't he? Mm-hmm. Because Superman's his sort of equal. He'll never. Luthor would never say, "Yeah, he's my equal." So he just assumes the smartest man on the planet just assumes that Superman would do the same thing because that's what Lex would do. And even if he did, and this is a good explanation of why he doesn't want to find out what identity Superman uses, other identity Superman uses, because it would ultimately be a waste of time because he'll just take on another identity like Luthor does all the time. But then, again, one of those like universe building moments, he does suppose that Morgan Edge, who is the WGBS president or manager, I forget now, but he's the guy that runs the TV station that Clark works at, is one of Superman's identities, or it's Bruce Wayne. That again, I mean, like I said, I've read this before, but I completely forgot a lot of these details. And I read that section, and again, I'm like, that is so cool. And it makes, like you said before, it makes Luthor such an appealing character.
Yes. I was like, the whole chapter of everything that was going on in there, I was just like, this is so good. I didn't want to go back to the story. I know I've said it before, but it was like every time Lex came on, it was just so good. He had whatever storyline that was going on. This was like a whole different book. If we took out all the other chapters of this book and just left the Lex, that was a whole book right there. And it seemed so fun and interesting.
Yes.
And yeah, it was just like, I don't know. It was just like capers. I just thought it was so cool.
Yeah. I don't know how many times we're probably going to say it at least once, if not twice more, but the Luthor stuff is just better than anything else in here. Yeah, it's really funny.
It kind of reminded me of I know we mentioned Sherlock Holmes earlier, but you know how Sherlock always would do costumes or whatever, or and this is going to go back to the 80s, and maybe this was you're listening to the podcast of the book or whatever, and but it kind of also reminded me of Pink Panther, Inspector Clouseau. So every time he would do, a makeup or whatever to do with everything. So a lot of this other stuff kept coming into my head every time we would get a chapter like this with his alter egos or his disguises or whatnot. But Pink Panther came to the forefront because I was thinking this was 1980s and a lot of those movies were around that time. And we used to watch Pink Panther a lot. Mm-hmm. It was one of our favorite things to watch. All right. You got anything else you want to say on that one? That chapter? Okay. Chapter 12. I'm going to say returns. I was going to make up my own thing here. CW Saturn tells Luthor. Oh, sorry. Chapter 12 is It's Real. CW Saturn tells Luthor it will give him something in return for the lock of Superman's hair. Lex wants the means to harness the energy between Earth and Hell. Then we get a flashback of Luthor's time in Smallville when a prank mentioned earlier he planned ends up blamed on Clark, which I talked about earlier. This is when Lex told Clark not to trust him.
What's your major question about this chapter?
I think this is the point where I kind of got a little bit confused with CW Saturn.
Uh-huh.
This is when I was like, wait a minute, something weird's going on now, but I didn't know what it was. I wasn't capturing it, but it didn't seem like, I don't know, it seemed like out of nowhere, kind of, I guess. All of a sudden, he popped over here, and then it just was really throwing me because it felt like it was something completely different. And this is like you said, this would be the first time. This is the first time. No, this last chapter. He sees him, right? Lex Luthor.
At the very end, yeah.
And then he's comes across him again. But it was just something that didn't make sense to me at the time when it first happened. And I was like, okay, this is weird. And then why did he, I don't know. I just had a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's, I did like and then just to go back when I had mentioned about the cows in the story, that's when this happens. And that was pretty cool too. I mean, I don't know if I have anything more to say about it because I kind of said it earlier on it, but it did all those. Again, I liked whenever we got a young Clark and young Lex together, and just how they played off of each other.
Well, and it's that whole situation with the cows and Clark taking the blame, and then Lex tells him, "Hey, by the way, in case I haven't warned you already, don't trust me." And Clark says, basically, "I won't."
Yeah.
Right. But Lex comes out of that respecting Clark. And I thought that was really, I don't know that I've ever seen in the comics, in those older stories, where that was the case. Everything that I recall reading, and obviously I've not read every Superman comic ever, but Lex always kind of treated Clark like like a toilet paper under his shoe type.
Yeah.
Situation. It's just like Clark's unworthy of his respect, but this is different. And I think the setup here, the fact that Clark is taking that blame for Lex and not ratting him out, that means something to Lex. So I did again, but again, it's a Lex scene. So it is infinitely more important than this thing where Saturn wants Luthor to get the lock of hair.
Over here, yeah.
Why does CW Saturn need a lock of hair? Does it? It made me think, or I was thinking maybe it had to do with the fact that when Luthor first encounters Saturn, and Saturn kind of tells him who he is, Luthor stumbles and Saturn lays hands on him, and then that allows Luthor not to be under Saturn's thrall in some way. And so is that why Saturn needs Superman's hair to control him? But that's not what his mission is. I was completely confused by this whole situation. And then later there is a situation with the hair that we'll get to that made me rethink this chapter completely. But then at the very end, you find out, no, yeah, it's just confusing. And I think based on your reaction, this is not one of those chapters that Maggin may have changed things or tightened things up to make it make more sense.
Yeah, no, because it was very confusing until like later on, like you said, when something else happens. I was like, this was like a major plot hole for me. And I was like, why is this even happening? Why does he need his hair? There hasn't been any kind of reference to this at all prior to this. So it did leave me in like a little bit of a state of confusion into that part of it.
Yeah, I think I would have had more satisfaction if Luthor somehow contacted Saturn to negotiate this, to be able to somehow siphon the energy or have access to the energy so that Luthor could use it somehow. But that's not what we were given. So yeah, I don't know what this means. Even after all these years, I don't know what this means. So I guess it's not as real as Maggin wants us to think.
Yeah, it is weird. It's not real. It's real. I mean, it's not real. It's weird. That's
Chapter
what the
12.
chapter should have been called.
It's weird. Bear with me. It's a bit weird.
Oh, man.
And that is the end of part 1. Please listen to the next episode for part 2. In the meantime, go subscribe to the Nerd Goggles podcast and follow MJ online. Information will be in the show notes. If you have feedback about this episode, please send it to me. You can email me at longboxreview@gmail.com. You can send me voice or text messages at 208-953-1841. And again, good Miracle Monday to you all. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye. We see Superman in action, and I think he does a pretty good job of describing how Superman deals with a cataclysm. Cataclysm. Oh my gosh, a tidal wave. I'll just cut that part out.